Welcome everybody to the EMA Veterinary Medicines Info Day 2026. Like I said, I've never seen this meeting room this full, and it's really good to see that strong engagement for the Info Day, and I think it's actually growing when I compare it to last year. We've over 120 participants here in this room. And I do apologize, this is not the most ideal room for this sort of meetings because of the way that we're sitting, and it will be not easy to see everybody who wants to take the floor. So if you simply stand up or raise your arm, and then that can happen. And we've got about 800 people that have registered to participate in the Info Day online. So I don't know if they've all joined, but in the hundreds we're expecting today. And they are from across Europe and beyond. And I think your presence here, both in person and virtually, underscores the importance of continued collaboration and communication in advancing veterinary medicines, regulatory science and innovation. Because this is the day where regulators and from side of industry and from the side of the competent authorities have the opportunity to meet, discuss, and where you can get information from our side. So over the next 2 days, we will explore legislative updates, regulatory developments, the CVMP work plan for 2026 and beyond, latest scientific guidance, and some of it really fresh off the press, I would say, progress on 3Rs initiatives, and a dedicated focus on innovation, including insights from the Innovation Task Force. And also we have invited colleagues from International Affairs to present on the open initiative on the human side, just for you to get an understanding of the things we're doing in terms of international collaboration. Each session offers an opportunity not only to learn about the latest development, but also to engage, and I'm looking forward to that engagement. So I encourage you to make full use of the questions and answers sessions, the networking breaks, which there will be, and the collective expertise assembled here. I think I see one person still standing at the back. Is there still a seat? A seat is coming your way, and then we can get this started. So, looking through the program of the Info Day, I'm really looking forward to some of the presentations that we will see. There will be the presentation from the Commission on the Biotech Act, which is really fresh. It's not been formally adopted yet, but it contains certainly a number of elements that are there to promote and stimulate innovation on the veterinary side, and they come on top of the regulation 2019-6, which already had that intent. Improvements that we've made over the years on pharmacovigilance process, and I think another topic that I'm really looking forward to is the update from the ADRA temporary working party. I know that there's very high expectations on the output of the ADRA working party, and it's good to hear what the status is, where they are, and how that will be progressed, and how it can contribute to better dose setting for antimicrobials. Then tomorrow the focus will be largely on innovation, latest scientific guidance being presented there, amongst others risk management plans on the novel therapy veterinary products document, and actually something that was accepted in this month's CVMP. So that is really hot off the press. So I think we'll try to present you in this year's program with the latest developments overall, and I hope you will enjoy it and see the benefit of it. I would like to start with thanking already all the speakers, the colleagues and partners who have contributed to shaping this year's program. And whether you are following us online from your desk or sitting here in the meeting room, We're grateful for your time and your commitment to improving the availability, safety and developments of veterinary medicines and increasing the health of animals. I think I have to do the safety instructions as well right now, don't I? Can they be this?
Yes, if there is an alarm, this lady here, Sylvia, stand up.
Stand up, please.
Just follow her, okay?
The door's out, so follow me.
So if there's
And Christina. So you have two ladies.
Orderly leave this room and we will guide you to a safe environment. That was the safety instruction.
We shall edit this out.
I would like to open the first session and hand over to this afternoon's chair, which is Emily Drury, sitting next to me. Emily is a department head in the Veterinary Medicines Division, head of Surveillance and Regulatory Support Department. She holds a master's degree in Biological Sciences from the University of Oxford, has over 20 years of experience in veterinary regulatory affairs. She is our regulatory brain altogether. And after 9 years of working with regulatory consultancy, she joined EMA's Veterinary Medicines Division in 2009 and has since held several regulatory expert and management roles covering diverse activities. And recently appointed officially in the role of Head of Department for Veterinary Surveillance and Regulatory Support. Emily, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ivo. So welcome, everybody. I'm your chair for the afternoon, so please keep your seat in the upright position. And you've had the fire exits pointed out to you, and mobile phones on silent, please, would also be great. So, yeah, we're going to dive straight into the session one on legislative updates, which is going to touch on upcoming legal frameworks within which the veterinary medicines fall within their scope to a greater or lesser extent. And then we will take a deeper dive within one of those areas, which is pharmacovigilance, which was an area that was totally redefined by the veterinary regulation. And I think we can say we're still in a phase of change management. So there's a lot to say about it. Our first speaker, as Ivo mentioned, is Rocío Salvador Aldán from the European Commission, the DG Santé's D4 unit for veterinary medicines. And she's going to talk to us about, indeed, the proposal for the Biotech Act, which was published just before Christmas and I think got all of our immediate attention. So over to you, Rocío. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the agency to have us here to present to the industry the Biotech Act. As we all know by now, the Commission adopted on the 16th of December a proposal which is known as the Biotech 1 Act. And that's because there's going to be a Biotech 2 that focuses on more industrial applications. The Biotech 1 focuses on health. And it is intended to strengthen the development of biotechnology in the Union, including, among other measures, by streamlining regulation in specific sectors, amongst others, the clinical trials framework for human medicines, the advanced therapy regulation, and the veterinary medicines products are being amended through this proposal. Today, we are not going to address the horizontal provisions of the Biotech Act, for example, on biosecurity or on access to funding, but we are going to focus on the amendments to the veterinary medicines regulation. And there are 5 points, and I'm going to focus specifically on the first and the second one more in detail. So the first one is the interplay between the GMO legislation and the veterinary medicines framework. And as a way of introduction, we think it is important to remind that microorganisms have been used in medicines for a very long time, since the concept of vaccine was developed at the end of the 18th century. At the end of the 19th century, we had the first live attenuated viruses. The concept of vaccine has been developed further and massively used both in humans and in veterinary medicine with a very good safety record. Microorganisms can be used in the area of vaccines in two different ways. On the one hand, we have the traditional approach to the development of vaccines, where viruses are either inactivated or attenuated with conventional tools, such as the use of chemicals, radiation, heat, and others. Or they can be attenuated or modified through recombinant technologies. And in that case, they fall not only under the pharma framework, but also under the GMO framework, despite the specificities of the products are largely similar. In fact, when one looks at the safety aspects for modified live microorganisms that are used in medicines, the safety concerns that are considered are issues such as the pathogenicity, recombination, replication competence, reversion to virulence, tropism, shedding, survival outside the host. All of those issues being equal for the live attenuated vaccines that are developed under a traditional approach or when they are GMOs. And so as I mentioned before, the regulatory framework has well equipped to deal with these safety aspects for a very long time. And the regulation 2019-6 addresses all of these safety concerns in the Annex 2. There has been additional guidelines that have been developed, such as the guideline on environmental risk assessment for immunological medicinal products, or the more specific guideline on live recombinant vector vaccines. So this shows that the pharma framework is well equipped to address all the safety aspects that are attached to the use of genetically modified viruses. The application of the GMO legislation has been identified as a concern for a very long time already. For a number of years, the Commission, together with the GMO and the pharma authorities, tried to work on soft approaches to improve the situation. And while there was some relief through the development of common application forms or standard errors, it was well acknowledged that the problem was not resolved. And that crystallized very clearly when COVID hit. And the union agreed that it was necessary to derogate from the application of the GMO framework in order to accelerate the conduct of clinical trials in the context of COVID. All of these steps were addressing only human medicines, and actually the review of the human medicines legislation has also addressed this aspect. When the pharma review is finally adopted, which is about to happen soon, the GMO authorities will no longer be receiving applications for human medicinal products. But nothing had been done so far for veterinary medicine. So we thought that it was necessary to take the opportunity of the Biotech Act to take some steps forward. And we think that the moment is timely because we have seen how out of the 8 vaccines that have been authorized under exceptional circumstances under the regulation, 3 of them are based on GMO approaches. We also see how the 4 vaccine technology platform technologies that have been certified, they are the 4 of them based on GMO approaches, which is indicative that this is a technology that is called to play a key role in addressing animal health. 15 years ago, there was international discussions among the then OIE, the FAO, and the WHO, discussing the development of and the use of GMO vaccines. In their document, it is referred as genetically engineered vaccines. And the conclusions were that the standards of safety should not be different from the GMO vaccines and the conventional vaccines, and also that animals that are vaccinated with this type of vaccine should not be considered as genetically modified animals. And it is these two conclusions that actually inspired the Commission proposal on this front. So on the one hand, we are providing for streamlined procedures for safety assessment. And on the second element is we are trying to remove any legal uncertainty for the users as to the fact that their animals would not be regarded as GMOs. So on the first point, streamlining the safety assessment, and the Commission proposal is that the GMO framework, and that includes 5 pieces of legislation, will not be applicable to veterinary medicinal products that are authorized or manufactured in accordance with the veterinary medicines regulation. There will be a single assessment that will be conducted in accordance with the regulation, and that affects both the clinical trials and the marketing authorization phase. And just before coming to Amsterdam, we received some input from the from the stakeholders, and it seems that the Commission proposal has not been fully understood, because some of you were still afraid that you would still have to provide the information required under the Deliberate Release Directive, the 2001/18. And I'd like to take this opportunity to clarify that what the Commission proposal does is to remove the application of all the, not only the assessment, but also the data requirements that are provided for under the Deliberate Release Directive. So on the clinical trial phase, the biotech proposal specifies that applicants or sponsors intending to conduct a clinical trial, they need to consider the specific characteristics of the product, and if they identify that there is a risk to the environment, risk minimization measures should be put in place. And there is a mirror clause as regards the assessment by the national competent authorities. The national competent authorities can, during the consultation, during the assessment phase, consult with the GMO authorities. I'd like to stress that the timeline for having a decision on the clinical trial is not incremented. So if there is any such consultation, that should not lead to any delays in getting your clinical trial authorization. The approach is based on the current situation, because we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, we didn't want to add unnecessary burden. At present, all clinical trials have to comply with GCP, good clinical practice. And environmental aspects are already embedded. Environmental aspects are already part of GCP. The clinical trial should take into account effects on the environment, also on human and food chains. So therefore, we are not coming with something that was totally disregarded under the current framework, and we do not think that there will be necessary to reinvent the wheel or to create a mini deliberate release directive under the clinical trial frameworks. In fact, we have to build on what we know, on the experience. We know that there hasn't been any single trial that has ever been refused with a GMO medicine out of concerns for the environment. And we know that the safety concerns are the same safety concerns as we have for attenuated live vaccines. As far as the marketing authorization phase, the changes are that the data sets that were required under Directive 2001/18, so the Annex 3 and the ERA assessment in accordance with the Annex 2 will no longer be required, and the consultation with the GMO authorities will no longer be mandatory during the assessment by the CVMP. So that's for the streamlining of the assessment. The second point was the increase in the legal certainty for users. For human medicines, this is not an issue because the GMO definition excludes that humans can never be considered as GMOs. But we don't have the same for animals, and therefore there was this legal uncertainty in which cases, especially if there is integration into the genome of the treated animal, that you would render the animal GMO because it falls under the definition. And that would affect not only the treated animal, but also the produce of the animal, so eggs, milk, meat, and so on. So we want to bring that legal clarity. That the administration of veterinary medicines will not bring animals under the framework of the GMO legislation. So that's the first topic that the Commission wanted to address in the Biotech Act. The second one concerns the reduction of administrative burden as regards the processing of variations not requiring assessment. We know that one of the goals of the regulation was to reduce administrative burden, and to that end, there was a new category of variations, so-called variations not requiring assessment, those that do not have an impact on quality, safety, and efficacy. However, we see that that good intention has not been achieved. On the contrary, administrative burden has increased. I want to thank all of you that contributed to the request of the contractor for the impact assessment that has really confirmed our impression that administrative burden had increased. And that is mainly because the possibility to consolidate notifications within a one-year period has been lost, the so-called yearly update, and secondly, because of the confirmation step by the competent authorities. Through the Biotech Act, we want to really make it happen that we reduce administrative burden. So we provide for the possibility to consolidate submissions of BNRAs that do not have an impact on the product information, and we propose to remove the confirmation step by the competent authority. A third element in the Biotech Act is the sandbox. So the concept of sandbox is to facilitate the development and marketing or use of innovation under proportionate requirements. We are particularly proud of the sandbox for animal health. Is the sandbox with broader scope in the Biotech Act. There are other sandboxes for food and for human health. The animal health sandbox covers technologies, methods, and products. And it is the only sandbox under the Biotech Act that can end with a single decision allowing access or use in the Union territory. How will it happen? So in order to set up a sandbox, a Commission decision is required. It will be based on a recommendation by the agency. And the duration of the sandbox will be limited in time. It will appear in the Commission decision establishing the sandbox. There are two phases. On the one hand, the development phase, where the innovator will engage in discussions with the agency The agency will discuss and develop the technical or scientific requirements that are considered necessary to ensure the safe use of that innovation in the Union territory. And in a similar way as it exists for medicines, there will be this possibility to seek scientific advice from the agency. Then the authorization phase, we have really modeled it upon the model of marketing authorization for medicines. So an application is submitted to the agency, there is an assessment by the agency, there is an authorization by the Commission, which is valid throughout the Union territory, and national competent authorities retain the ability to take interim measures if they detect that the product or technology is not poses serious risk. So as I mentioned, a sandbox is limited in time. There are two possibilities for termination. One is the regular one, the one that is foreseen in the Commission decision. And when that happens, the Commission will take a decision as to the appropriate framework for that kind of technology in the future. We have also provided, and I think that is the only sandbox that provide for that clarification, that any authorizations that have been granted during the duration of the sandbox will continue to be valid. And then, as I mentioned before, competent authorities retain the ability to take interim measures if they detect a risk. So if a risk is identified and the benefit risk is considered to be negative, then the sandbox and the relevant authorizations can be terminated earlier. The fourth measure is the SPC extension. As you know, the supplementary patent certificate is intended to prolong the intellectual property rights of companies that developed patents in the area of medicines. The Biotech Act proposes a 12-month extension of the SPC, provided that certain conditions are met. It has to be a veterinary medicinal product developed by any of the biotechnology methods described in Article 42.2a of the regulation, intended to treat zoonotic diseases, a new active substance, a new mode of action, and at least one manufacturing step should be conducted in the Union. Then finally, and this is important, in particular because we expect innovation to be constantly happening, not only outside what it is a veterinary medicinal product, but also within what is a veterinary medicinal product. So the Commission proposes that the Commission should have the empowerment to update Annex 2 to technical progress, so that we see developments in the area of veterinary medicine, so not a sandbox, but some innovation that happens in the area of veterinary medicines. Then it can be tackled through the Annex 2, which is a much faster process than starting a sandbox. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rocío, for giving us this overview of the intended legal act and also the rationale behind, because as we know from the experience of implementing the current regulation, the rationale is always an interesting insight. The why is important. So just to say, we will have the Q&As at the end of the 3 presentations, and just so you can start preparing, somewhere there's a QR code where you can ask questions via Slido. But we'll also obviously be taking questions from within the room, but at the end of the 3 presentations. Our next speaker is Corinne Philippe, who is leading the Global Regulatory Intelligence, Policy and Communications team at Boehringer Ingelheim Animal Health. She's a vet with over 20 years experience in the animal health pharmaceutical industry and a particular interest, I understand, in 3Rs. And today, Corinne is going to be representing Animal Health Europe to give us an industry perspective on the Biotech Act and also the horizontal legislation that comes from other sectors. So, Corinne, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Emilie, also for the introduction. So, how does it work here?
You can go up and down. Or page down.
Thank you. So I'm glad to have this opportunity to present to you on behalf of Animal Health Europe our perspective on the legislative initiatives that are impacting our sector. And I want to underline also that it's a collaborative work, and I'm grateful for all the inputs I get to build this presentation from the member of the association. And I will make a deep dive in our preliminary assessment of the Biotech Act, but I will also touch briefly on some aspects of the horizontal legislation, which often raise quite some concern. So, in fact, first, there is a reminder of our mission. We are developing animal medicines and products that contribute to the health of the animals, pets, and livestock. And by this, we are also playing a role in maintaining a balance in One Health by safeguarding food supply, reducing zoonotic risk, and supporting sustainable livestock system. Then, yes. We are strongly regulated. Our regulatory framework has been revised in the last decade with two new regulations, and many other side legislation have been updated or created accordingly. But despite this robust and dedicated regulatory framework, we are often increasingly impacted by horizontal legislation, PFAS, REACH, CLP, etc. I will come back later on this one. But among this long list, we have now the Biotech Act, also on which I will focus. So we are glad as industry to have been involved in this legislative project because animal health is already a biosector for a long time. We have some recombinant vaccines, biotherapeutics, advanced diagnostic, digital and artificial intelligence tools. And this, for us, this text is a strategic opportunity to accelerate the innovation, support the regulatory simplification, strengthen the EU competitiveness and the resilience, and also support the One Health objective. Of course, this will work only if our specificities are fully integrated and taken into account. And today, we are aware, in fact, it's the most concrete regulatory initiative which is impacting our sector in the absence of other omnibus approaches. And we are aware that there will be no change yet to the text, but we hope that our comment will be taken into account in the next legislative step. So again, it's a preliminary assessment, and you already addressed quite of the question and clarification we did it, but in fact, discussion is still ongoing on some aspect, and I try to catch up on the key aspect. So if we start with the GMO, there are two highlights. First, we really welcome the clarification that GMO legislation do not apply to animals treated with GMO product. At least it will be written in a text, so now it's a given. And also we appreciate a lot that the GMO parallel assessment no longer applies to the vet medicinal product. It's a clear improvement in the administrative burden for the dossier submission. And I think it was clear, thanks to your presentation, that the provision also applied to the clinical trial. So that was one of the main concerns we had. Yet the criteria to consult or not the GMO authority are not maybe very detailed, but at least it should not impact the predictability that we have on the clinical trial when we submit it. We just wonder, some member states have set up some local provisions sometime in lines with the 2118, and we wonder how this will be impact the local requirement, but I think that will be solved once the final text will be released. That will be a regulation, and that should be okay. And again, the same technical, we understood that the same technical requirements remains, but it seems that we will have some flexibility to adapt them. Yes. We had some proposal, in fact, regarding the GMOs, because we would like also to take the opportunity of this update of some of the provision in the regulation 2019 to try to introduce the definition of the GMOs in the text based on what is already existing, but with an adjustment, and it would read then that a GMO is any biological entity capable of replication and transferring genetic materials. And indeed, GMO veterinary vaccine strains, they pose really a risk for the environment when they can replicate. And the main reason for this proposal is also to align and to promote alignment across all the EU agencies. Because some of the colleagues, in fact, experience sometimes some challenge in the interpretation of what is a GMO and what is not. We have also a second proposal. There is a proposed amendment to the Directive 21/18 that introduces low-risk genetically modified microorganism, and we would like to have a corresponding provision in our regulation so that, again, we have harmonization across agencies. And the criteria that we propose are the deletion mutant with the introduction of any new genes and the previously approved platform technology-based GMO. Then we have a concern, also a small concern, with regard to the alignment among several texts, because as you know, the Annex 2 of the regulation is referring to the Directive 21/18 for the environmental risk assessment requirements. The guideline on the environmental risk assessment is referring to the Article 8.5 of the Regulation 2019, and this article is referring to the Directive 21, but is also proposed for deletion in the draft Biotech Act. So we just thought that a thorough check and could be done on the cross-reference to avoid validation issue and potential assessment divergence that could happen in the future. The next topic, if we are leaving here the GMOs and move forward to other provision, is the variation that do not require assessment. And in fact, we clearly appreciate the two improvements that has been brought. So both what you explained, so the label VNRA, which are notified within 30 days after the implementation, and also the 1 year that we gain again to notify non-label VNRAs instead of 30 days. And this is really, and including also the removal of the confirmation step from the authority. It's an operational simplification, but that's very positive, and that will allow us to release some resources to prioritize innovation over administration burden. Moving forward, there are some elements also that we wanted to get clarified. There are two articles that are dealing with the artificial intelligence, but it's unclear whether the provision apply to both human and also veterinary product. And we would just like to avoid misalignment where it makes sense to have some application in both sectors. Also, for the new approach methodology definition, we have the feeling that it's too narrow, and we are not the only one to state it. And what worries us is that it will be the first time that we have a legal definition of the NAM in a legislative text. And if it is too narrow, we may miss some opportunities to continue working and supporting initiatives that would not match this definition, but would have been beneficial, for example, in terms of animal reduction. I'm thinking here, for example, of the virtual control, which is a very innovative way to reduce the number of animals used when we have no choice but using them. There are also some questions with regard to the regulatory sandboxes. I think I understood a little bit better the concept and what you wanted to explain us, but in fact the concept for us is designed to overcome innovation barriers caused by the current regulatory framework by providing some alternative regulatory pathway. But for vet medicine, because it applies to products which are not regulated under union legislation, we are a bit confused with that. In fact, we are working only with products which are regulated. That's our core business. So, in fact, in all the other sectors, the regulatory sandbox are applying to products and technologies which are regulated in their respective regulation frameworks. So that will be to amended. So we propose to have the same for our vet sectors and amend the text so that it can be used in practice. So I hope we can discuss later on that. And we have also some questions, but you answer again a little bit in your presentation, in particular with regard to the status of the marketing authorization. We wonder whether it will be temporary or full EMA, which, okay, thank you, which I understand will be valid all the time. And also, we are wondering for the international impact, do you exchange already with counterparts in animal health outside Europe on this concept, and what are the openness of the other authority to such provision? Moving on, also there is a last point we want to share with the 1-year patent extension. And in theory, it's positive, but again, the scope, we feel it's quite narrow. It's only for biotech products against zoonosis with a unique mode of action, with a new mode of action and a partial EU manufacturing. So we would like to propose to enlarge the scope, for example, to applying it to products that support the fight against AMR, which was a big objective also of the regulation 2019, or transboundary disease, to products that contribute to the food security, and even if the mechanism of action is already known. And we propose also to extend the period, because 1 year is not very sufficient. In animal health, we usually have a long return on investment. And if we are dealing, for example, with infectious disease, there are always uncertainties about around the outbreak that impact the use of the products. So today, we feel that no product in the animal health pipeline would fit this criteria. So we can support the provision, obviously, but only if it is amended. So to conclude on the Biotech Act, we appreciate having been included in this initiative, and that reflects really good intention. And clearly there are some provisions like the GMO provision and the VNRA notification timelines that are very positive and that should be kept. But we feel that we could go further to address innovation barrier. First, the NAM definition needs alignment with other stakeholders, and we need to be sure that it tackles all the innovation around this in this area. And there is a need also for us to revise the scope of the regulatory sandbox, or at least to clarify it and the patent extension. Otherwise, we feel that we could not use them, and it would be really a missed opportunity. And overall, we suggest to support innovation on new antibiotics, unmet needs, limited market, exceptional circumstances. And maybe also we could think about reintroducing a temporary authorization mechanism, because the current framework is not sufficient, and it's unclear whether the regulatory sandbox would cover all these cases. I am done with the Biotech Act, and I would like now move shortly on the horizontal legislation. There is a lot to say, but I will try to keep it short. We are seeing some positive elements from the Biotech Act, clearly, but we have to acknowledge also that it is not the case for the rest of the horizontal legislative initiative. And we often see a lack of understanding of our sector's specificities and the knowledge of the regulation from the stakeholders who are building this text. And when we are included, there is often a strong impact on our license to operate. So I will just take a few examples in the next slide. We have some general key asks when horizontal legislation are considered. We would like to see a benefit-risk approach instead of a risk-only approach. Our product have a benefit on the animal health and even beyond, and it must be taken into account. We have some essential public goods, so our product must remain available and accessible all the time. And we understand the need to monitor the quantity and the use of chemicals in particular, but we are a small sectors, and we already have quite some, report to do, and we would appreciate that other reports are limited to the strict minimum, and also that databases are interoperable as much as possible, so that we report once for all and not several times. And I will make a short focus on 2 key points. First, the PFAS restriction. It's very important for us to keep the permanent exemption for API, for the active ingredient in the final text, and we are very concerned that it may not be the case. Also, regarding the manufacturing and the packaging, so long there is no viable alternative, we need to be allowed to use the current ones. And both API and the manufacturing provision, they are both together crucial to keep our product on the markets. And we will take the opportunity of the coming SEA consultation to repeat this, but we would appreciate any support on this from your side. And if I'm going also shortly on the packaging and packaging waste regulation, there is a provision here for reporting, which is expected to start in August this year. But to date, the guidance is not yet released. It is missing, and the requirements, they are not fit as far as we know for the VMPs. So we really need a transition and a sector-specific approach. And that becomes quite urgent because we have only a few months left before the deadline. And also in this text, there are some derogations for the vet medicines, but they are temporary. They will be reviewed either in 2028, which is quite short, or 2035 for the second one. And that raised some concern for the long-term availability of our medicines. So I'm stopping here, even if we could spend more time on other provisions, but it's a clear illustration of the impact that we are facing. As a conclusion, so we are concerned and closely monitoring the horizontal legislation, and we need some support to ensure that the availability of the vet medicines is not put at stake. It's really a call for a thorough impact assessment when we are put in the scope of these legislations by other stakeholders who are not always aware of our specificities. But to finish on a more positive note, while we have underlined some key adjustments that are needed to ensure the Biotech Act delivers its objective in the animal sector, we are really supportive of it, and it's a great addition to complete the innovation objective of the regulation, as was mentioned by Ivo in his introduction. And like we are supportive also of any regulatory initiative, provided they are science-based, proportionate to the needs to preserve the animal health. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Corinne, for highlighting your perspective on the opportunities, the concerns, and the things that still need some clarification. And I know we will be coming back to probably many of those points in the Q&As. So now, like I said, drilling down into one particular topic area, we have our next speaker who's online and hope all working fine, is James Mann from the Swedish Medical Products Agency, and he's here in his capacity as chair of the Pharmacovigilance Working Party of the CVMP, and he's held that role for 2.5 years. James is a vet. He has, as I'm sure you all know, extensive experience of pharmacovigilance and more recently clinical assessment. And he will be speaking on the implementation status of what we call the new processes with respect to pharmacovigilance and signal management, which is still a fast evolving area. And I think it's fair to say has really never been under such a high level of scrutiny. So James is going to walk us through some of it. Over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Emily, for the introduction. And thank you, Emma, for the invitation to present today the status of the implementation of pharmacovigilance processes. And I apologise for not being able to be on site for you today. If we go to the next slide straight away, I plan to primarily focus on the signal management process, which is both the fundamental aspect of pharmacovigilance activities in Europe at the moment, and I will cover be a reflective part to that aspect, and then also looking to the future and specifically the focus of 2026. And then towards the end, I will touch on two additional aspects relating to the public portals that we have, and also on the Vet Med Safety Day for 2026. So if we go to the next slide, I'm quite well aware that the audience today is quite broad, and I don't think that most of you work with pharmacovigilance on a daily basis. So I thought I'd provide a micro introduction to signal management process in order to give the ability to understand what we're talking about, and also gives an introduction to Sonia's talk that will be after me. But in the regulation itself, particularly in the recital, the signal management process is now considered the gold standard for pharmacovigilance activities in Europe, in comparison to the previous PSURs that we had under the directive, the periodic safety update reports. And signal management is high level defined in the regulation as being an active surveillance of the available pharmacovigilance data in order to determine whether there are any changes in the benefit risk balance of the product, notably identifying risks. And if risks are identified, then we discover or try to establish suitable mitigating measures to protect both the target population, which is animals, the public health, and also the environment as well. And then on to the next slide, please. Obviously, with the signal management, signal becomes the primary and fundamental element in that process. And here again, in the implementing regulations, there's a slight, a sort of a high-level definition of a signal. And here it stipulates that it can arise from multiple sources, primarily the sources from pharmacovigilance adverse event reports that we gladly receive from vets and animal owners from the field. But signals can arise from other sources such as observations and also from published literature as well. And a signal is a potential new association between a product and adverse event, or it could be a new aspect of a known causal association. And here I'm talking about those adverse events that are either listed already on the product information or potentially class effects. And here, once we've identified a signal, then the next fundamental element is to apply some form of judgment or clinical judgment to see if there's justification to actually investigate further, to then actually conclude on a causal relationship between the event and the product. So that's what this process is all about. Next slide, please. Next slide. While we're talking about the regulation itself, I've tried to earmark what I've called the 4 principal obligations of marketing authorization holders within this process. The first one is that they should be continually monitoring the benefit risk balance of their products. And then the second one is to carry out this signal management process and take into account contextual data such as sales data to provide some context, and also looking further into scientific literature for any potential adverse events or signals. And then they have 2 notification obligations, which are number 3 and 4 on the screen here. One of those is a 30-day notification if there's any new risks identified or any changes in benefit risk balance. And there's also shorter emerging safety issues for those real urgent safety issues, mainly relating to quality issues, most likely. And then the 4th one is on an annual basis, they should be recording all the results and outcomes of signal management, including a conclusion of the benefit risk balance. And the next question here is, how do they fulfill these obligations? And primarily here, fulfillment is based on those notifications that were stipulated. Those 30-day notifications are translated into the system. And here I'm talking about IRIS, which is managed by EMA. The 30-day notifications are transposed as a signal management submission. And these should include an assessment report from the marketing authorization holder outlining the signal itself and their investigations. And then they should select appropriate action for that signal. And from the regulator's point of view, we highly recommend that the signal assessment report template is used by MHs to document their analysis. This enables them to capture all the relevant information and also facilitates the evaluation of those signals by the relevant competent authority at a later date. These annual obligations are fulfilled by submitting an annual statement submission in IRIS, and here they confirm their compliance with the regulation and then also conclude on the benefit risk balance at that point in time. On the next slide, please, we indicate that these obligations that I've sort of set out are further supported by guidance, and notably it's the Veterinary Good Pharmacovigilance Practices module on signal management, the VGVP module. And I'm not going to delve into this one in any detail, but here it outlines the fundamental steps of the signal management and how you end in the proposed actions, which I talked about in the assessment. And here from the screen, you can see that there is an ongoing revision of this VGVP module, which is one of the key sort of focuses of 2026, which I'll come on to in a moment. But while this revision is ongoing, one of the interim measures that we've implemented is on the bottom footnote here, where we've updated an existing best practice guide with some practical guidance on signal detection and partly aspects on signal management. And this was published last year. And obviously, this document will have to be updated at a later date in line with the VGVP module when that is finally published. That will be done at a later date. Next slide, please. I've mainly been focusing on the obligations of the marketing authorization holder, but within this signal management process, there are responsibilities of regulators as well. And the 3 key ones that I have identified from the regulation are that they should be evaluating the outcomes of signal management, which in practical terms is that evaluating these signal submissions that are coming into IRIS. Then in grey here, and it's in grey here because it's not a new aspect of particularly of the regulation, but regulators through controls and inspections can check for compliance of the MHs. And then the third option, which is new to the regulation and rarely triggered at this point in time, is when needed, a target signal management process can be triggered by regulators if there is a particular signal that they consider needs a thorough investigation from their side. But if you take the obligations and these responsibilities together, in my eyes, it causes a natural interplay between MHs and regulators in the entire process. So there's a feedback loop. At this moment in time, I'd like to just step back a little bit and look at and consider how we've got to where we are today in terms of the implementation. And as most of you may be familiar with, initially for the first 2 to 3 years of implementation, there was a designated group established, the Signal Management Expert Group, tasked with looking at sustainable approaches to signal management. That came to an end in 2024, and we moved over to establish a revised process based on experience and actual recommendation from that group. And the revisions have been mainly on the regulator side in terms of developing 3 work streams. One of those is to evaluate the signal management submissions that have been submitted systematically by the MHs. We have a risk-based monitoring as well in place to look at particular products of risk potentially, and then also we've in order to retain some of the experience and some of the experience and the capabilities of the original group, we've established an operational expert group under the Pharmacovigilance Working Party, which are tasked with surveillance on a general sense and at a high level sense, being able to look at all the data in the Union Pharmacovigilance database, as they are uniquely placed in having no sort of access restrictions on the data. Next slide, please. While we're focusing on the signal evaluation process, I thought I'd sort of touch on that, but I won't go into huge detail. But as I said, these signals that are coming in, if we go to the left-hand side of the screen, they're coming in with reviewed on a monthly basis and allocated to a competent authority who evaluates it and considers whether they have their opinion is the same or different to the marketing authorization holder. If there's a difference in opinion, an assessment report is written by the competent authority and goes through a consultation step. And through the entire process, on the right-hand side, top right, the MHs have an ability to provide feedback into that evaluation process. It all boils down to both streams, whether there's an agreement or disagreement. It boils down to the regulatory outcome that is published in the public portal of IRIS, and I provide the link here if people are interested in going in there. This is updated to reflect the regulator's opinion on that signal, and it reflects the action to be taken. But generally speaking, this review process is a sort of two-sided approach where there's a feedback loop into the evaluation. And that is what has been established in 2025 and is up and running to some extent. Next slide, please. Now I'd just like to give you a futurist or a future plan of attack for the signal management process. And here in the green, the timeline has been updated with what's planned for 2026. And obviously, the focus here is revision of the VDVP module on signal management. As you can see, we've got a public consultation active and live for a concept paper relating to this revision, which outlines the fundamental aspects that will be up for revision. And then it's envisaged at a later date, towards the end of this year, there will be a public consultation around the actual revised module. And then once published, there will be there's envisaged that will be designated training sessions or webinars to highlight those main changes in the document. I will go on to the next slide because I'll straight away, and just to earmark some of the reasons why the revision has been activated. And one of the principal goals of the revision is to try to establish this common understanding that has been lacking over the years of implementation. And fundamentally, we'll be looking at trying to provide better clarity into the steps of the signal management process, and also providing better clarity around the reporting obligations of marketing authorization holders, specifically of what signals they should be transmitting into the system. As I said, some efforts have been made around the best practice guide, but that will be updated. And the key sort of processes that need looking at are those key steps of the signal management process. And then we also need to look at refining or improving clarity around the definitions of those fundamental elements of the signal process, specifically validated signals, and then also the definition around refuted signals and the reporting obligations around those signals specifically as well needs to be clarified. The idea is to optimize as much as possible and try to ensure that there's minimal impact on both the regulators and the marketing authorization holders in the revision. But we need to really be careful that we have a sustainable result and a sustainable revision at the end. As I said, a concept paper is out there. Unfortunately, the deadline is near coming to the end, as in on the 15th of March. But this concept paper has given the opportunity for stakeholders to provide their input or their latest input. But I should flag up here that all the input that has been provided by stakeholders over the implementation phase that's gone by will be fed into that revision as well already. Now, I'd just like to touch on two final parts, which should be quick. The public portal, I've mentioned one, which is IRIS, but now I'd like to mention the other one, which is where you access the adverse event reports that are, sorry, my computer's just closed itself down. 1 second. Oh, no, I'm back on. I mentioned IRIS, but now we're doing talking about the adverse event report platform. And here, this platform is there to provide full transparency in terms of obligations in the regulation. We've had feedback from stakeholders indicating the platform needs improvement, and EMA's consulted stakeholders specifically through a survey. And now they've engaged in an initial project in terms of looking at updating the guidance notes and disclaimers in that platform to enable that users who go into the platform will have be able to interpret the data correctly and also understand the limitations in the data that's in that data system at the moment. And then the next sort of phase, and that's coming to be implementing shortly, and the next phase is to consider the user-friendliness of the platform. And here there's the idea of having a consultation with FVE to consider the opinions of the vets. And then I think in the long term, there may be a plan to consider modifying the dashboards to increase user friendliness and also increase the ability to understand the data that's visualized in that platform. And I provide the link here if you're interested in going in there. The final element of my talk today is just to maybe as a slight advertisement for the Vet Medicine Safety Day for 2026. This is the second of these days. It was launched last year as a collaboration between EMA, the member states, and the Federation of Vets in Europe. This year, the theme is encouraging the reporting of lack of expected efficacy and antiparasitic products. The date to put in your calendars is the 8th of April of 2026, so it's quite soon. The messages around this theme have been sort of drafted by the EFFECT Working Party and the Pharmacovigilance Working Party, and EMA's communications department have worked with those messages to generate some campaign material. And all I have to say around this slide is that I just would ask stakeholders, as they did last year with the first day, to help facilitate the spread of these messages and help us raise awareness around specifically this theme and generally around the importance of reporting adverse events and what they can lead to. And that's my final slide, and I thank you for your attention. I hope it's given you some sort of indication of the main focus primarily for signal management for 2026. So thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Thank you, and much clapping in the room, which hopefully you could hear a little bit. So thank you very much for the comprehensive overview of the state of the art. And we'll move straight to the industry perspective on the same topic. And for this, we have Sonja Schwab, who is presenting on behalf of Access VetMed. A vet by training, Sonja is working at Vet Viva Richter and with QPPV and clinical development responsibilities. And Sonja, you're also highly active in fora on the development of the IT systems that derive from our vet regulation. So thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. This is a joint presentation of the industry organizations, Access VetMed, Animal Health Europe, and the Association of Veterinary Consultants. In the first couple of years following the implementation of the new regulation, we also always had these big topics like new technical platforms, the databases, and new legislation, new guidances. And now, 4 years in, we have had time to gather some experience. And so today, our focus will be on areas where we have identified where we are not entirely happy maybe at the moment and where there's room of improvement. James already opened the floor to this by saying that there's coming a revision of the VGP module on signal management. So that's one thing that's certainly in our focus as well. The databases I will also touch on briefly, although there's no active development on the PHP databases at the moment, but still they are a core item of our daily work, so they are important. Not only the VGBP module is being revised, there's also ongoing discussions on the review or potential review of secondary legislation with the aim to reduce administrative burden. And also want to touch briefly on the fact that with the change to signal management, we also introduced a disharmonization on a global level of PHV requirements, and that's something that we face as well. First to the guidance updates, as James already said, there's an updated version of the best practice guide that now includes also a chapter on signal management. It's a combination a bit of what's in the VGVP models with further explanation and in connection with practical guidance on how to use the data warehouse queries. While this guidance is, of course, much appreciated, and James also already said this, cannot fully address the concerns raised by industry because, of course, it's at the moment it's within the limit set by the VGP module, but as indicated, this will then subsequently also be reviewed. So for a first step, still much appreciated. Something that's also in this guidance is the signal assessment report template that's now mandatory also for refuted signals. James just worded it a bit differently. He just said it's very recommended. So, and since the guidance has no legal impact, so we hope that we still can come to an agreement where maybe a simplified template used by MAHs for let's say smaller signals where there's not such an in-depth assessment is required will still be acceptable because this signal template is very extensive. That's understandable for very big signals where there's really a change in the safety of the product, but maybe not for all the signals. Some reflection on the revision of the module, because, yeah, that's very welcome. It's, risk management is the main process for pharmacovigilance. That's what we do all the collecting of adverse events for. So we have then a way to find out where are our weaknesses, where are the risks in our products. And Animal Health Europe already has proactively, in a meeting last year, proposed verdicts for the revision. And industry organizations are very committed to participate in this public consultation process, so we're really looking forward. It is important that whatever we do in pharmacovigilance is ensured that there's a harmonized process within the EU. For example, at what point becomes a signal really relevant for communication? And also to keep in mind that risk management, signal management is based on global data. And for this, we should also strive to have a global harmonization of timelines, being on reporting, being on reviewing, everything. Some examples that have already been pointed out where we would like to focus on when reviewing the module. For one, there cannot be one single approach for all products because there's new products where, of course, a smaller number of reports may be relevant because there's a lot more new conditions to be observed shortly after launch versus old products that have been on the market with APIs that have been in use for decades. Also, there's often then a really large number of cases. to be reviewed. So there must be different approaches for these types also. Currently, we are focusing on products where the reports are mostly based on single animals in per case, and for this the disproportionate analysis is very helpful. But for VMPs used to treat large herds, this kind of analysis is currently not sufficiently adopted for signal detection for this type of products. Also, in signal detection, you find a large number of potential signal, and that's really important to reduce the workload, to find a way to try steps for further prioritization and determination which of these initially detected potential signals are really relevant for validation and for further in-depth analysis. So validation is not a screening step. It's neither triage nor prioritization. This has to come before that, and then after validation is where you really look into the data. And as I said, there are different scenarios, and there should be flexibility regarding the methods used in the evaluation. The pharmacovigilance databases are the core for everything we do, and especially for signal management. It's become rather quiet. There are no official agenda anymore. We notice that with regard to the data that's being input, that's the adverse event reports, because there's often been complaints about the quality of these reports. It appears that NCAs once again are actively reviewing cases, and efforts are made to improve the quality of the cases in there. One aspect that makes analysis sometimes a bit more complicated or difficult is that the product that is reported is really then mapped to the correct product that's in the databases. And for this, of course, it's a dream and it's nowhere near realization, but because we have third country products, and especially the big companies have a lot of the pharmacovigilance data outside the EEA, therefore implementation of a global product dictionary would be beneficial overall for any type of analysis. Some things in the databases are not always quite clear how they work for the MHs. One such example is the duplicate detection system. It has been repeatedly presented that it is there. Again, in the updated guidance, EVET best practice guide, it's again mentioned, but it's a bit nebulous to us. I think one thing that is confusing, because the tool itself is not available for MAHs and it's not intended for them to be available. I think some are expecting it. Where we should see it working is actually in data warehouse line listings. There's often a specific column, but so far I have not met anyone that has already flagged a duplicate there, or maybe there's somebody in the room. So we're a bit still confused on how it's working, because we know there are duplicates in there, we find them, but they're not picked up by the system. And also what is important, because we all have to use these databases, we have to rely on them, is that there still seem to be issues with transfer of data to consuming systems that may be like the product grouping that is done in UPD, but is used mainly by data warehouse and IRIS, and they do not always end up in the systems as they are set up in UPD. And also I have personally observed this more frequently in the past half year maybe, that there seems to be issues sometimes with transferring the adverse event reports to data warehouse. And again, that's critical if we do analysis, and then when we have our in-house databases as well, and when those results don't match, you start questioning what system to rely on. And we are all by law required to do at least once a year our analysis in data warehouse. We really need to be certain that this system is working well and has all the relevant data in there. But they're not completely forgotten by the development either. There has been a new group established with representatives from EMA, NCAs, and MAHs to start again discussing and reviewing some of the issues we just identified, like how to improve the duplicate detection system, also improve the grouping options of products for data warehouse analysis, not only the ones, the product groups set up by MAHs, but other options also for NCAs to use to consistently group the correct products together, because we all know names can vary among countries. Sometimes the same name is used by different MAHs in different countries, and then the products are mixed up together. They should not. And that's something we are looking into. And a third point, very hesitantly accepted, is the review of the incidence calculation in data warehouse. For one, this is still not available to MAHs, which causes a huge uncertainty to us, because NCAs can see incidence calculations in there. We also know the methodology used for incidence calculation is, from our viewpoint, a bit arbitrary. We are rediscussing the methodology as well, but we still want to keep pushing that it becomes available to MAHs as well, because in signal detection, if you look at the form we just, or the submission template we just talked about, one of the points in there is incidents of, and we can't see it in the system, so we're required to use a system, and the system does not even give us the information. So we're still asking for this to be implemented. And on this point, as industry, we really miss this open exchange in a wider forum that we had in the former CHIC meetings. I'm not aware there's any upcoming meeting planned. And this was also a great opportunity to discuss in a wider forum on the databases. As I said, not only the VGBP modules being reviewed, there's discussions ongoing about potential review of secondary legislation. Many thanks to the European Commission, where already last year there has been a stakeholder meeting with a very open discussion on identifying points or legislation that impacts us and puts unnecessary burden on industry. One such example raised by industry was the maintenance of the PSMF summary, because even though the technical step, the submission itself in UPD, and many thanks to the UPD development team, the latest update end of last year, that you can a special supergroup grouping functionality. This makes it really, really easy on the technical side, but it doesn't change that it's still associated with huge costs. And to have a smooth approval process then in UPD, there's a lot of administrative preparation outside of UPD, communication with involved NCAs before you can do this submission. And this is still a lot of work, even though on the technical side, it's really, really well done now. As I said in this discussion, since last year, the Commission signaled openness to reviewing the process. We are not on any specifics yet, just the option to discuss it, and potentially this would, because we are not changing the main regulation, but potentially this could be done by only changes to the implementing act and technical changes in the UPD. And the last point that came with the change to signal management, which is the gold standard and should be the way forward, but previously with PSURS, we were harmonized on an international global level. We still are in the countries where they are absurd, because not the whole world has changed to signal management, unfortunately. Luckily, some countries, some regions outside the Union accept the new process, but not all. And some countries have actively switched to signal management, which is principle positive, and in cases where, like the UK accepts the same due dates based on ATC bed codes, we really have to be careful that there is no disalignment, because if we have to do the same thing at different time points or in different ways, this becomes very, very burdensome. also with keeping up where do we have to report what and when. It's really difficult then to keep an overview, because from our perspective, this is one product, and a product has a safety profile everywhere. It should be the same everywhere and shouldn't differ where we are marketing the product. Yeah, this complexity is still a challenge for the marketing authorization holders, and we really hope that we can in future come again to a global alignment here. And yes, of course, this is the EMA Info Day, and we acknowledge that this is not something for EMA to resolve on a global level. We just ask for openness to support this harmonization wherever possible. And with this, I want to say once again thank you for all the significant work that has been undertaken to establish the framework. Of course, it probably would always be impossible to get it completely right. That's why we keep discussing and talking, and really, really grateful for this opportunity and the openness that we have this ongoing dialogue throughout the implementation, and even 4 years in now. And this continued collaboration between regulators and MAHs is really the key to achieve a robust and efficient EU pharmacovigilance system. And as indicated before, we would like to see the forum of CHIC in some form or other still to be continued, re-uptaken to maintain our databases. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for these reflections. And I think it's clear we're all working very hard to bed down all the processes. And yeah, certainly we need to reflect on, if we change goalposts, which goalposts do we move? Because otherwise we could easily possibly not reduce administrative burden and just lead to more change management in an area that has already undergone a huge amount of change. So it's a tightrope to walk down. But we'll come back to, and I will already at some point in the Q&A ask Camelia, our head of pharmacovigilance, to come back on the question of the ex-JIG, Joint Implementation Group, because I think there's an easy answer to that. So I would like to really say thank you to the speakers who were bang on time. I mean, precisely, all of you. It was brilliant. So we now have the full time available for the Q&As, which there's some on the screen, but let me first throw this open to the room. Is there anyone who would like to take the first plunge and put their hand up? Otherwise, I can go maybe straight to the first one on the screen whilst you think about it, because I think this the first question is one that has is going to come up quite a lot. So, Rotheo, if I can put you on the spot, which is for the regulatory sandboxes, do we have an idea of the types of products or technologies that were in mind that would benefit for regulatory sandboxes? If these products should not be regulated under union legislation, in inverted commas, the products cannot be a VMP, a feed additive. And I think indeed this question is a slight paradox, because we don't know what we don't know yet. But I will pass to Rotheo.
Yes, indeed, we do not have a magic ball. We don't know what kind of innovations could be happening in the future, but the idea behind the sandbox is something that is not a veterinary medicine, and I would like to have that clear. For adaptations to the veterinary medicine, we have the tool of updating the requirements through the Annex 2, which is a fairly straightforward approach. What the sandbox is intended to cover is something else. Is other type of innovation that could be beneficial for animal health, and that it doesn't have any regulatory framework in Europe. It was difficult for us to go into the Biotech Act, because we were asked which kind of products do you have in mind. This came more for the human health sandboxes, where we already know things, like, for example, the case of organoids, the case of the genetically modified organs of animals that can be used for humans. So things that are happening that do not fit into any of the regulatory frameworks, but that we need to tell to the company working on those areas, how do I put these products on the market? And we thought it would be unfair to exclude animal health, because these things might also be coming in the future. So we are not having any particular product on our heads at the moment, but we want to make clear that this is, in case this disruptive innovation comes, there will be a way to accommodate it, so that we are not only looking to accommodate disruptive innovation for human health, but also for veterinary health. And to reassure you that any kind of innovation that needs to happen within the concept of veterinary medicine, that can be addressed through the amendment of the requirements in the Annex 2, which is a far simpler process.
Thank you very much, Ruthia. I see a hand up, Kat Sterling from Zoetis.
I was going to have to say who I am.
I can't do
You've
that
done
for
it for
everybody,
me.
I'm afraid.
So a follow-up for that, Rosia. So when we look at that, we initially read that statement thinking it was a potential value for, because we lack any type of true conditional licensing for major species, major areas outside of exceptional circumstances and limited market in Europe. And we looked at how you'd positioned it for human health, where it is usable within regulated products. The way you described it is actually something that's potentially beneficial in the context of regulated products for particularly major unmet medical need in major species where it can take a long time to generate data, etc. And the concept of a sandbox could be very, very useful because it's managing risk and at the same time generating additional real-world experience and data. So when we look at that, I hear what you're saying is to provide a framework for the unknown, but at the same time, I think, as Corinne tried to say, we feel there's a potential big miss here in potentially being able to tackle some of the gaps in our current legislation. And in fact, there's nothing I don't think there's anything we could modify in the context of Annex 2 that would address that. It's what's in the core legislation, the regulation, that's the issue. So I would just kind of like to bit more feedback as to sort of why it's been positioned so differently to human health, because I think we have a sense that it's not actually going to be particularly beneficial for us as an animal health industry outside of very, very niche areas.
First, I would like to stress that we don't feel that it has been positioned differently to human health. Actually, if one looks at, let me look at the article, I think it's Article 40 of the Biotech Act, which deals with the sandbox for human health, is clearly limited to those products that, or it cannot apply to products that are likely to fall under the scope of the legislation in the area of health referred in Article 39, that is the substances of human origin, the medical devices and the medicinal products. So again, you have the same principle. If you fall already under a legal framework, you don't go to a sandbox. You have to apply the legal framework.
Thank you, Ruthia. And I see Zoetis again. Yeah, Rafael Brunner.
Sorry, a couple of comments follow up. The first is that, yes, Raffaele Bruno Zoetis, sorry. The first is that if we look at what happened before the Biotech Act, which is the call for evidence, and then we look at the Biotech Act, on some aspect we see a breach, in some aspect we don't see a breach. The call for evidence clearly pointed out at a regulatory framework which is burdensome and not fit and not resolving all the issues. If we look at this driver and then we look at the Biotech Act and we look at the GMO, we see a breach. We look at the VNRA, we see a breach. The regulatory sandbox, we don't see a breach. You just now mentioned how the regulatory sandbox was applied in other areas. The regulatory sandbox definition in other areas is referred to the same regulation where the regulatory sandbox will be included. The terminology that is at the end of the definition is that the regulatory sandbox can be used in situations that otherwise would not be possible or appropriate given the current legal framework. Essentially, the regulatory sandbox in other areas is saying if this regulation cannot make it, then the regulatory sandbox can make it, but not if it is not regulated. Only in the veterinary sector we see the sentence not regulated by the legislation.
So if we look at medicines, human medicines, there is what is called a regulatory sandbox under the pharma review, which, as you said, it is for to create flexibility embedded when it regards a new concept for a human medicine, so a medicine. We have that through the Annex 2, which allows us to be flexible and to determine the requirements that are necessary to address nascent fields of medicines, and the concept of novel medicine can be updated. I would please ask you to compare the process of sandbox for human medicines and amendment of the Annex 2, and you will see which one is more efficient. And then, as regard other innovation that doesn't fit within the definition of medicine, be it veterinary medicine or human medicine or medical devices of SOHO, the requirement is the same also for the sandboxes in food, is that it doesn't fall under the legal framework, so that it is not used to circumvent a legal framework. So there are two elements. One, flexibilities for something that is already regulated, which in our case, it is channeled through the Annex 2. And then there is this other concept of how do we deal with products that are not regulated, that we don't know how to call them. We don't know how they are supposed to be put or, in the market or used.
Thank you very much, Rothio. Klaus, you'd like to come in.
Yeah, Klaus Hellmann, Argenta and Association of Veterinary Consultants. Well, that would, if I listen here to the discussion, then that means we are starting to regulate products that are currently non-regulated. So that means we introduce two products that are currently not falling under any legislation. We introduce kind of through the back door of this act a regulation of these products. And I just wonder, obviously we have certain legislation on these products as well. We don't have medical devices in animal health, so that's excluded. So kind of most of that scope would now potentially fall under that legislation. And I just wonder if we should address that in a very direct way and first of all say, hey, we want to have a Medical Devices Act or something like this, because otherwise we have the nascent products definition in the Annex 2 or in the regulation. Therefore, yeah, I have problems to define now where we need that. And to be honest, this is for me a little bit of an odd way to introduce this for quite a broad spectrum of products which are entering the market that I do potentially agree, yeah, maybe there is some need to regulate that, but it may not be the right tool to do it. Would be my proposal too. I think then we should have a medical device regulation on the veterinary medicine, in the animal health space, sorry, not veterinary medicine. Thank you.
Rothio. But just to come in, I mean, the sandbox is optional. So it's not widening the regulation by default. But over to Rothio.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the sandbox always starts with an application from an innovator. So this is not a tool because we want to increase legislation. If we wanted to increase legislation, we would just make a commission proposal on medical devices for animals. And we haven't done that because that's not what we intend to do. So this is this will not be kicked without industry requesting the establishment of the sandbox, and then it will be discussed the merits of that sandbox. We need to identify, is one of the requirements, what are the obstacles to come in the market if there are no, if there is no legislation. So if there are no obstacles because they are already being sold, there will be no sandbox.
Yeah, Jordi, you'd like to comment?
Yeah, one comment, Klaus.
Jordi Torren, who's the head of Department of Evaluation and Innovation.
Support. Hi, Klaus. You put it in a quite, angle in which you say, well, you're going to regulate things that are not regulated. I can see two sides of this also. It might allow you also to have products that right now cannot reach the market because they are not regulated to reach the market. And I can think of some of those products. The only thing is that I don't know what the Commission think about those products, so I will refrain myself. But I've seen on the human side some products that right now are using the human medicine that we cannot allow in veterinary medicine because our regulation does not allow it. So that might be also an option. So I wouldn't see it so in such an overly negative manner.
Okay, I'm going to cut us away from this topic. We can continue in the coffee break or later, because I'd like to, before we go for coffee, to have some questions on other topics. So let's take some on pharmacovigilance. I see the first one. This is quite a practical point, and it's the comment on the the revised template for assessment of signals that come from marketing authorization holders to the regulators. Oh no, sorry, I've got myself confused. Well, there was the concept of a simpler template for refuted signals, I think, and and then a compensation for that, the MH keeping all the data in-house or tick box in IRIS. So basically, conceptually simpler template form. So I will ask if James or Camelia would like to comment on that. Camelia's happy to do so. James, if that's okay with you.
I can start and maybe James can complement. Hello, everyone. Just to say, as you all know, we are still in the early stages of implementing and using this new, let's say, still new signal management process, albeit we're not at the very beginnings, but we are still in a phase that is critical because we are now revising the fundamental module, the VGVP module on signal management, which basically sets the grounds for the process that you are applying in the companies, and also gets on our side, on the regulator side, helps us to understand how you apply the process. So in the long term, obviously, getting rid of this need to have refuted signals submitted makes sense, and we will look into this, and probably this is the way forward. But for now, and some of you may have experienced this in certain examples, we still need to understand the process that you are applying now and how you get to the conclusion that a signal is refuted. And in order to do so, we invite you to still use this assessment report template to describe your process and the way of thinking. And in some instances, maybe you have noted that the regulators disagree with your final conclusion. And of course, there is a justification. But as you can see, we are still not at the stage where we are all confident on the same process. There's also a bit of difference in approach between companies, obviously, experience and so on. So at this point, that's why we did leave in the guidance notes of the assessment report template the request to please use this template also for refuted signal, the ones that you consider refuted. And having said that, I would like to emphasize that the whole template is not meant to be filled in exhaustively, let's say. So I think it's also mentioned in the guidance notes that when certain sections are not relevant, of course, you can explain and say this is not applicable and then provide a short explanation. So we hope that with this update of the template, we are helping you and we are helping us as partners to understand each other in how the signal management process is applied. Thanks. I don't know if James or other colleagues would like to intervene.
Well, we'll have to move on, but just could we answer the question about the XGIG? So this was the joint implementation group that was set up in the earlier days of the implementation of the regulation, but it's just been reincarnated into something else.
Actually, okay, it is. There is an opportunity for industry to interact with regulators, which is key, and we have always supported this. It's just that we have renamed this joint implementation group since last year, as you know, because we wanted to acknowledge that we are past this early stage of implementing the new regulation. This was maybe early 2020, 2023, but now, as you know, there is an interaction, there is a meeting called stakeholders meeting between the Pharmacovigilance Working Party and the industry. We had it last year, and we also have the interested parties meeting, on the 26th of May. We already have a date for that one, and thank you for sending topics. But the XGIG, let's say, didn't disappear. It's still there. And as you mentioned, Sonia, on top, we have also a targeted smaller group established on pure technical aspects of EV. So nothing changed in practice in terms of your opportunity to interact with regulators also outside the interested parties meeting.
Thank you, Camelia. I'm going to take a couple more questions on the Biotech Act, and one of them I think is a relatively quick, at least one of them, yes/no answer for Rothia. So, Rothia, do all the VMPs or only biotech VMPs, or rather, are VMPs or only biotech VMPs concerned by the 1-year notification for VNRAs?
All veterinary medicines is a general amendment to the Article 61.
Thank you. That was a nice, clear answer. Then we have, there was a question about the SPC extension. So this is not summary of product characteristics. This is a supplementary protection certificate. And this was why is there a specific focus on products related to zoonosis amongst all the therapeutic areas? Was there? Can we make any comment on that at this point?
Yeah, the link to zoonosis was because it was felt that it was the most connected with the overall human health aspects that is addressed under the Biotech Act. There is the element that, of course, for veterinary medicines, contrary to what happens under human medicines, data protection is far more generous. It's easily double. So the impact of the SPC protection is more clear for the human medicines because they have less data protection. But it was felt that the parallelism between the human and the veterinary medicines should be kept, even though everyone can understand that having a very long period of data protection means that necessarily the impact of any SPC extension is necessarily smaller.
Thank you very much. Are there any? Yes, I see questions in the room. Yes, next to Eric, could you introduce yourself?
My name is Claudia Sigge from the National Association BFT, and I come back to the discussion on the pharmacovigilance database. So we heard that there is a new tool for detection of duplicates, but that is only to be used by the authorities. And my question is, why is it not available for the marketing authorization holders? Because it would also be useful for them. And we also learned that not all data to the respective cases are visible to the marketing authorization holders to detect duplicates. For example, the numbers of the postal code is not visible for the MHAs, we learned. So apparently they are lacking some information the authorities have on their own cases. And is that on purpose, or is it only technical limits that will be solved soon?
Thank you for the question. It's quite granular, and I think, Camille, do we want to take that away?
I think we need to take this back and discuss also internally with our technical experts, and we'll get back to you on this one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll take the last question from before the coffee break. We're a few minutes over. Erik de Ridder from Elanco.
Thank you. Erik de Ridder, Elanco Animal Health, and I'm fortunate enough to also represent European industry on the VICH steering committee. So my question is on the last slide around pharmacovigilance. It was mentioned that we lack some international harmonization. And while there is and first of all, I would also like to congratulate James on a really good presentation. It was very informative, and we see a lot of work being done. Also a focus on reducing admin burden, increasing sustainability. That's, I think, a continued focus for EMA, for the national competent authorities, for the Commission, so that is really good. From that perspective, as we, as multinational companies, are providing the vast majority of adverse event reports and pharmacovigilance reports, for us, having an international harmonization in the way we need to conduct pharmacovigilance is very critical. And we don't see that happening at this point in time. And it is a critical moment, but we also see a lot of countries around the world developing their own kind of systems. So what are the European authorities and EMA and the Working Party doing to further global harmonization on this very important type of processes? Because we see this harmonization, which actually means an increase of admin burden that is incredible. So how do we need to tackle this, and how can you help us though?
Thank you, Erik. And I don't know, James, would you be able to make any comment on that?
No, it's a very good question, and it's been raised multiple times about global harmonisation and the fact that the EU has implemented signal management on its own, and PSURs in existence in other parts of the world, then there's naturally a disharmonisation straight away. In terms of trying to modify it or to work towards it, we do have membership within the VICH pharmacovigilance expert working group, and from the European Union, and they are committed to try to raise this aspect around harmonisation within that group. And I know it has been raised, and I know from what Sonia said just now that there has been discussions around initially around a global product dictionary, which is something that probably needs to come first before we start thinking about any other processes that we can harmonise globally. But it is something that is it is a difficult topic to tackle, and the fact Europe hasn't really invested time in it, primarily because we're trying to land in the European approach to make that sustainable and to actually make it attractive for other regions to hop on the same train. So it's been a bit of a challenge, and the priorities have been to looking to the system in Europe first, and then, but now we're settling in the system, then harmonisation should be one of our priorities, but I don't know how to solve it. Apart from we've got membership in that VICH specific group, which I know are discussing it, which you are a member as well. I don't have any specific examples of where we can harmonise, but it is something that we always, it comes up in all forums all the time, and it's something we need to tackle. But it's a difficult one. Sorry for that response. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And yeah, food for thought. The different regions obviously are evolving in their own manner still in some respects. And yeah, indeed, generally we need to converge to leverage expertise. But we'll have to leave it there on this topic for now. And there's obviously a lot of questions received that we didn't get to. For the ones received online where they're quite specific, if you included your name, we could potentially come back to you. Otherwise, we will feed it into the relevant operational groups or teams from our side, either CVMP, working party. Sorry, Rothia. Oh, you wanted Rothia? Rothia wants to take a question. Okay. Otherwise, we've got okay. Go on, Rothia.
As I see a question, if there is a request for deliberate release prior to a clinical trial application, the answer is no.
Good. Right, we have the coffee break now, networking break. Please be back at 4:10 for the session 2. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everyone. And sorry, I'm slightly shouting into the microphone because we've been told the sound online is not so great. So I would ask, in fact, all my speakers to shout into the microphone as much as possible. So, and then just also for the colleagues who are connected online, I would just like to remind that this, in case anyone's just joined, that this event is recorded and will be published online. Same session as the first format. Let's try that again. Same format as the first session, and the Q&As will follow after all 3 presentations. You can ask your questions via Slido, and we'll also take questions, obviously, from the room. So we have the second session, which is going to be regulatory updates on a really wide range of topics. And then again, we'll take a closer look at one of them, which is one of the, as Ivo mentioned in his welcome, one of the highest profile topics we have within CVMP at the moment, which is how to review dosages for authorized antimicrobials. So we'll take a deeper dive into that. But before that, and to kick us off, I will pass over to Johan Schefferly, who, as we all know, is the CVMP chair since 2022, working from the Dutch Medicines Evaluation Board. So Johan will take us through the CVMP strategic goals for the forthcoming years and the activities that the CVMP is engaged in. Thank you, Johan.
Thank you, Emily. So I'm talking about the CVMP work plan for this year. Of course, it would be extremely boring if I read out the work plan for you. Besides, it's available online, so everybody can read it. So what I did, I took out this a strategic paper that we produced in 2024 with the input from you, and that's the 3-year strategic paper of the domain. And those have 7 strategic goals, and what I want to do is to look at the CVMP work plan and where it fits in those 7 strategic goals. So I go through all of them and let you know what we are doing in all of these areas. So one by one, I will start by supporting innovation. It's an important area for us and for you. So it's the key objectives of this goal, just to remind you, is to strengthen support to developers throughout the development of life cycle of novel therapies, to promote innovation and use of new approaches in the development of novel veterinary medicines, and to facilitate implementation of novel manufacturing models. So how does that trickle down to these activities for CVMP in the work plan? So there are a couple of points there, as you can see, and I will quickly take you through it. The first is to set up operational expert group of working parties to provide guidance on new technology. So guidance is important. So we have an operational expert group running at the moment on safety of nanoparticles. That's ongoing work. One of the new things is the RNA interference and RNA antisense therapies. We are setting up an operational expert group for that as well. And then one coming after that is the quality aspects of secretomes as VMPs. So those are the areas that the Novel Technologies Working Party will work on starting this year. The second is to set up a European expert community on new technologies. That's just to connect all the experts in our network. And that is in progress at the moment. We, of course, provide scientific advice and contribute to innovation task force meetings. That is a continuous process. We support applicants in obtaining classifications for VMPs, for example, for biologicals or immunologicals. That is, of course, also a continuous process. Then continue promotion and availability of veterinary medicinal products, especially vaccines, by implementation of approaches like the exceptional circumstances, the vaccine antigen master files, the vaccine platform technology master files, and multi-strain dossiers. Then, yeah, that is a continuous process as well. Just to mention that in 2025, so the last year, we had positive opinions for 7 products that were authorized under exceptional circumstances, covering products for BTV, for HP, AI, and for EHT. In some of those cases, we have existing platform technology master file certificates being used by the companies, and that actually facilitated fast approval of those products. So I think that is working very well. What we also started is to develop guidance for veterinary biosimilar VMPs. So for this task, the CVMP has established a temporary drafting group to deal with procedural aspects and also to develop relevant guidelines. We just discussed this week a concept paper, and if all goes well, we can release that for consultation in the next month. So that is coming up soon. So that's in progress. And then also a continuous thing is that we all work together with the Quality Innovation Group. That is a group on the human side, but also looking at novel manufacturing approaches. Okay, so that's what we are doing in the area of innovation. So if we then go to the next strategic goal, that is supporting availability, what are we doing there? So the key objectives is to provide support and develop new medicines, for limited markets, and support developers of vaccines to translate research and development activities into marketing authorizations, particularly those that are needed to control incursions of emergent disease. Okay, so the activities in 2026 in this area is to provide a Q&A on eligibility criteria for limited market for stakeholders, to streamline working processes for the assessment of limited market applications. It is, of course, Article 23 is a new article for us, and I think it is important that we streamline the working practices for that. And the third thing is to provide recommendations to applicants on the classification of products as limited market and eligible under Article 23. So that's in the area of availability. Then we can go to the next one, and that is something that we talked about already today, streamlining pharmacovigilance, an important strategic goal for all of us. The key objectives are there on the screen: to collaborate with stakeholders, to further develop and advance veterinary pharmacovigilance, to maintain efficient and effective conduct of pharmacovigilance, including surveillance and signal management, and to improve communication of pharmacovigilance issues related to VMPs. So I'm not, I'm just giving the highlights here because there's also a lot of this in the work plan of the Pharmacovigilance Working Party. So we provide oversight for the continued implementation of efficient and effective methodology and procedures for post-authorization surveillance following their implementation in 2025. Please have a look also at the Pharmacovigilance Working Party work plan. There's more detail in there. But something I just wanted to highlight again, and it was discussed already today, is the VGP module on signal management. You have seen the concept paper, and we fully aware of the opportunities for improvement in this area. We see that this is important and urgent, and therefore the CVMP has asked the Pharmacovigilance Working Party to prioritize this work. And we have a very ambitious goal to end this work by the end of this year. It's not a promise, but it is our ambition to do so. So that means also that the guideline, or sorry, the module itself will be released for consultation also during this year. Okay, then we can move to the next area, and that is addressing antimicrobial and antiparasitic resistance. And also here the key objectives: facilitating prudent and responsible use of antimicrobials and antiparasitics, promote their alternatives, contribute to minimizing risk to humans and animals from antimicrobial resistance, and that's the same for antiparasitic resistance, of course. Coordinate the activities to strengthen data collection and to support continued availability of effective antimicrobial and antiparasitic veterinary medicinal products. I think a very important one, the last one. So what are we doing this year? Again, you have to look at the antimicrobials working party work plan, because there's more than what you see here on the screen, but some of the highlights is to provide scientific opinions on existing antibiotics, focusing on the review of the posology. That is the ADRA project, and that is the person next to me, Damien, will talk about this in the next presentation. There are high expectations from myself and the CVMP on this project. Then, of course, promote responsible use in partnership with other agencies. We contribute to the 5th JIACRA report in collaboration with the EFSA and the ECDC. Of course, we provide pre-authorization support via early pre-submission discussions, scientific advice, develop and obtain marketing authorizations for new VMPs that can assist in the reduction of antimicrobials, initiating development of guidance and so on, and promote the responsible use of antiparasitic medicines. And you also have to look at the antimicrobials working party work plan. One of the things that is coming up is a reflection paper on macrolides, lincosamides, and streptomigrants. That is coming up soon, and it is, I think, a very good piece of work of that working party. Okay, then we are going to the environment, addressing risk to the environment. Again, a strategic goal with the following key objectives, and that is to ensure that potential risks to the environment associated with the use of VMPs are evaluated and mitigated. And secondly, to update the environmental risk assessment methodology and guidance in accordance with current scientific knowledge. So for 2026, the thing I wanted to highlight, and I think everybody is aware of this, is that we have had a concept paper on the environmental risk assessment for specific groups of companion animals products. Those are the ectoparasiticides in dogs and cats, and discuss the next steps. So we will consider those comments. We'll look at the next steps. We have planned a meeting with the stakeholders in June, so that it will be announced later, but you can already see that it's coming up in June. There are lots of other activities in this area, but for that I would like to refer you to the working party work plan. All right, then we are going into the area of the 3 Rs. The 3 Rs has one overarching key objective, and that is to support and promote the development and application of 3 Rs compliant methods in the regulatory testing of veterinary medicinal products. We do have, of course, the VICH, and I think that is very important. What we do is to support the regulatory acceptance of 3 Rs compliant methods through promoting those in the context of VICH. It is important because global harmonization, if that doesn't take place in this area, it will hamper the development and implementation of 3 Rs methods. So that is, we see this as an important task. For all the other activities, I just want to refer you to the Working Party work plan. There is this 3 R's Working Party of the EMA that is combined human and veterinary. They have their work plan. They also have their own stakeholder meetings. So you can also go there if you are interested in that topic. Okay, and then we are going to the last item, and that is strengthening quality output and stakeholder engagement. So the key objectives are here to strengthen the quality of the scientific review process by developing the available expertise in the network, to support optimal organizations of the available expertise within the network for services provided to the CVMP and to the EMA, to identify and enable access to the best expertise across Europe and internationally, and promote stakeholder engagement. So we have quite some activities going on here in 2026. So the first is to collaborate with the EU Network Training Center, contribute to the training of assessors on regulatory scientific topics and guidelines for the network. We also work to increase the capability in modeling, simulation and extrapolation within the European network in different scientific areas. We consider the need to establish European specialized expert communities in more scientific areas related to the vet medicinal product. We have one ESEC on environmental risk assessment, and we just established one for the novel therapies. So we only have 2 at the moment, but we consider the need to look further to establish more. Then together with the HMA and the VSFG, we analyzed the current data gaps in and future needs for capacity and capability in order to ensure sustainable scientific support for the CVMP. The CVMP relies on the expertise available in the member states, so in the network. Then another important point is to streamline evaluation processes to enable more efficient use of resources. Liaison with the CHMP methodology working party for scientific advice and potentially also for our marketing authorization applications or variations is important because they often deal with the same methodological questions as we do. Also collaboration with the CHMP infectious disease working party, that is sometimes also important for the antimicrobials working party. They also work together with them. And then in terms of stakeholder engagement, the organization of the Veterinary Medicines Info Day, which is today, the interested parties meeting of the CVMP, that will be in May, and focus group meetings, and I just announced that there will be a focus group meeting for these ectoparasiticides that will take place in the first week of June. And finally, reviewing the content of CVMP agendas and minutes to increase transparency, and we already took a couple of steps there. So I think that was the last strategic goal. So just one further slide with some closing remarks. As you can see, we have work ongoing in all of the 7 strategic areas of the CVMP. We also, at the same time, see increasing number of applications, so the workload is increasing for us. And also there's an increase in work from other legislation. So, for example, just the Biotech Act that we talked about, one substance, one assessment. So there's other horizontal legislation that we need to work on, and also collaboration with other agencies on various topics. So it is quite a lot of work, but I'm very proud of the team of the CVMP and the working parties that we managed to do this. It is, I think, European Union at its best. So I'm very proud of that. So with that, I will close, and back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Johan, for the tour of the activities. I think there's something of interest for everyone in the room, and picking up on your last slide, it definitely shows why investing in the capacity and capability, the expertise in the regulatory network is really needed to deliver on the tasks in front of us. So we have next Christina Patson, who's sitting on my right. She's the head of regulatory affairs and referrals in the veterinary division, and she's going to give us, I think, what we've called historically the sort of regulatory bulletin or notice board. So again, a big mix of topics and hopefully of interest. So over to you, Christina.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, indeed, it's a lot of not very closely related topics and not on the same high strategic level that Johan just presented. We're going down into the day-to-day nitty-gritty of what we all do. So what I'll cover today is a bit on data protection on limited markets, exceptional circumstances applications, novel therapies, requests for extension of the clock stop, on invented names, on ways to contact us, and everyone's favorite topic for the next year or so, the QRD updates. So firstly, with the data protection, I think we can all agree that the framework for data protection has increased exponentially with the new regulation compared to what we had before. And it's not easy, I think, for anyone, neither for you as industry nor for us to deal with it. But the main responsibility is still for the applicant to ensure that the period of protection has expired if they are relying on data belonging to a different product. This is stated in Article 18 of the regulation, and it's also explained in the Commission's guidance to applicants. Where the competent authorities play a role is that we should reject applications which are in breach of the period of protection, and this is based on the information that you provide in the application. So for us, this is mostly at the step of validation. Of course, if we have validated something and realized during the procedure that the data protection period hasn't expired, we will still act, but it's more a matter of rejecting the application already at validation if we spot that. So you need to be aware of when the period has expired, and we need to be aware when it has expired. But as we said, the legal responsibility lies more with you. So we do not have a responsibility anywhere to define or to publish that date of expiry, and those have been the requests that we have been receiving. If it's possible for us to do that, it isn't. And as I said, we don't have a legal responsibility to do it. Where we can help is to increase transparency in the EPARs on the applicability of legal provisions related to data protection. So on the side here, you see an example of an EPAR, which is published. It's available in the UPD for the product concerned, and it was the EPAR is on a request for it's on a variation application, which was approved, and the application also requested an assessment under Article 40, Paragraph 5, which was carried out, and this is reflected in the EPAR. So if anyone is developing a generic for this product, they can find this information there and take it into account when preparing their generic application. So this is just an example, but this is where we're heading and the intention. So you would, for the companies developing generic products, you would still have to read all of the EPARs and check what is reflected there in terms of data protection. And you'll have to do the math based on published dates. And we will be doing the same on our side when validating, as I said. Next topic. Limited markets, you're probably all aware already, but just to highlight again, we have updated the guidance, and with the guidance I mean there is a new Q&A document. This supersedes the old reflection paper that we had on the classification of VMPs intended for a limited market. And the main change in this Q&A is that it clarifies something that came up, I think, a year ago at the Innovation Day, which is that the classification for limited market is provisional. The reflection paper used to state that it is valid for 5 years, and we clarified last year this is actually not the case. It is provisional. It is granted at the time that it's granted, and it is checked at every step of the procedure. There is now standard questions at day 120 and at day 180 in the list of questions and the list of outstanding issues for the applicant to reconfirm their justification for a limited market. What is re-examined then is the exact same criteria that are examined with the initial classification. Then from our side, we have to check that also when we're issuing the opinion, and the Commission is also checking it by the time they're issuing the Commission decision granting the marketing authorization for this limited market product. And as I said, this is the main change. The rest is more procedural, let's say. And this Q&A doesn't affect in any way the scientific guidelines, which were also adopted in all areas related to limited markets. They remain as they are since 2024. And okay, on exceptional circumstances, this is a question we receive very often in pre-submission meetings usually. What is exceptional circumstances and what isn't, and does my product qualify as exceptional circumstances? You can see here the article itself, Article 25 of the regulation, which says that by way of derogation from Article 8, in exceptional circumstances related to animal or public health, there could be data requirement reductions. There is no legal definition of what exceptional circumstances means, which is why we're getting those questions. But the advice that we usually provide is that Article 25 is a derogation of Article 8, and as such it should be interpreted narrowly. We recently discussed that the article is product agnostic, so it doesn't say it should be immunological products or biological products or pharmaceutical products. Any category of products can be eligible for exceptional circumstances. I think we're all aware with the 7 opinions that Johan was mentioning that we adopted last year, and then also historically with the previous framework, what tends to qualify as exceptional circumstances is an outbreak, unexpected outbreak of an infectious disease. So it's usually vaccines. It doesn't mean that it cannot be a different category of product. It's just that so far we haven't seen it. And the main issue we would like to clarify today is that unmet medical need in and by itself does not constitute exceptional circumstances. So the fact that there is a gap in the market doesn't mean that we'll reduce the data requirements. The products are usually authorized based on a full dossier as per Article 8. And data requirements are only lowered, as we said, and in exceptional circumstances. But despite the lack of definition, it doesn't mean there is no other product on the market. Therefore, my product is so important that you need to lower the requirements. So this is just to clarify, and hopefully this will make the pre-submission meeting shorter for everyone involved. Now, jumping to novel therapies, what we wanted to say is similar. It's good to know in advance what the dossier requirements are, and confirmation of whether the product is classified as novel therapy ahead of time would be useful for that. And it would define the dossier requirements, but also some regulatory aspects. And also, this includes the need for the applicant to provide a risk management plan, which is mandatory for novel therapy products. You will be hearing a lot more about this tomorrow morning by Noemi. There is an option for you to voluntarily request such a classification at any stage of the development. It can be very early on, it doesn't matter when it is. For this, you can use the form for classification of veterinary medicinal products. So the CVMP recently started this procedure to classify products as biological, non-immunological, biological, immunological, or non-biological, because sometimes it's not very straightforward. And there is a form on the EMA website, which is linked here, that you can use for this, and the same form includes a section for classification for novel therapies. This procedure is free of charge, and as I said, you can do it at any time of the development. In case no such classification has been requested, we would be checking from our side at the stage of eligibility. So that's the latest point by when it would be confirmed that the product is a novel therapy. And as I said, all the dossier requirements apply, including the risk management plan. Okay, changing topic again completely. We have recently received a few requests for an extension of the clock stop. And those have always happened, and it's understandable that sometimes things don't go according to plan. We need to change the timelines. This is fine, and when the request is justified, of course, we accept it. But what we've observed recently is sometimes multiple requests for the same application, so the clock stop keeps getting extended over and over and over again, or we receive a request for a very long extension already from the get-go. And basically, you are all aware the centralized procedures take 210 days. This is 7 months. Sometimes the request for a clock stop is 2 years. So in our view, that means that usually the application has been submitted prematurely, it's not been ready, and the long clock stop is obviously needed to finalize studies during it. So what we will do in this respect is work on a procedural guidance, which we'll obviously consult you on and publish eventually. On clock stops, the same is happening on the human side for the exact same reason. We envisage a stricter approach to clock stop extension requests. Let's see how it goes, but the current thinking is if we are expected to evaluate the application in 7 months, then you shouldn't be getting more than 7 months of clock stops, let's say. But as I said, this is ongoing process. So you're all advised to please submit your requests in a timely manner and provide sufficient justification why the clock stop is needed. We've also had cases when the clock stop request, extension request was received, I think, even after the date of the submission was planned or something like that. The CVMP didn't even have time to react. We either had to receive the responses and instead we got an extension request. So please, send them in time so we can look at them and consider. Okay, another very administrative burden, but administrative issue, but turning into a burden, the invented name check. It is under revision at the moment, but we have that guideline on the invented names for the centralized procedure. I will admit that it's not the clearest of guidance documents that we have, and it's not easy to read and to figure out, but still the main points, I think, come across, and you're probably very familiar with them, that the names should not be misleading and should not be promotional. And this principle has always been there, and it should be clear. And while you can send multiple requests for the same applications, we recently narrowed it down to 2 invented names that can be proposed per procedure. It used to be 4, it is now 2. I would ask you to please use them wisely, because some of the requests we're getting lately are... You must know that they're not acceptable when you're submitting them already. I know it's probably difficult to discuss with your marketing departments, but what happens in practice is that when the names are not in line with the guideline, we have to reject them. You have to submit again, we have to reject them again, and it turns into extra work both for you and for us. That is unnecessary. So we would advise you to please check in detail before submitting. And we are also aware that historically we have been accepting names that are not strictly in line with the guideline. So we do have a few examples where you could easily say that the name is promotional. When we now suggest that such a name should be rejected, we often get a comment, but you accepted it in the past in 2003. Yes, we know, but it doesn't mean we have to repeat the same mistake over and over again. So on this, we're also tightening the approach a bit, so we would not be taking those into account. And whoever got lucky in 2003 got lucky in 2003, and that's it. One of the names we had recently had a qualifier best. So please don't submit names that have best, amazing, max, etc., because they're simply not acceptable. And now, in terms of ways of getting in touch with us to ask questions on all of those topics and anything else, we have 2 main channels. One is Ask EMA, and this is intended for general questions. In our case, on veterinary medicines, of course, you can send the question on anything else. On the website content, reporting missing documents if it says the EMA published guidance on this, but you can't find the guidance and it's not on the website. Or general regulatory clarifications when it's not an ongoing procedure, when you have a wider question. This should be submitted via Ask EMA. The way it works, and most of you are probably familiar with it, it's a single interaction. So you submit your query, and we provide the response by a deadline, and this does not require an EMA account. The other main platform that we have is ServiceNow. That was introduced a few years ago, and this is intended for technical support and reporting bugs or accessibility issues with EMA IT systems. I'm sure you have all used it extensively. We use the internal version of it equally extensively for IT systems. But apart from that, it has the option to submit administrative requests, pre-submission requests, and for certain post-authorization procedures. There is a menu, and you click on the button and land where you need to land. And then it goes to the respective team internally. The difference to Ask EMA is also that there are multiple interactions possible within the same query. But of course, that means that it also requires an EMA account. So you are logged into the system and you can have an exchange with us. So we often notice requests going the wrong way. So something that should have been submitted via ServiceNow has come via Ask EMA and vice versa. And again, that just means like we have to reject it from the system where it is and redirect you to the other system. So it would be helpful, I think, for everyone if you get more familiar before submitting to just check which would be the right system. And I think that's my last slide. And as I said, it's everyone's favorite topic. We are still in the transition period for adapting the product information to the QRD template version 9, which is in line with the provisions of the VMP regulation. The deadline for this is the 29th of January next year. As you know, the product information of all VMPs has to be aligned with the QRD template 9, whichever version we have, 9.0, 9.1 by then, by this deadline to allow for batches to be released on the market. So after the 29th of January next year, we would not be allowed to release batches unless the PI has been updated. You all know that, I know. We don't expect to be accepting exception requests. So hence, you have been warned. Please do not come in February next year and ask, can I please release this batch with the old PI? And this is just a reminder. And as I said, I know you're all well aware of that, but we're using the opportunity. So with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Christina. And I think you'll be busy in the Q&As. So looking forward to that. Our third and last presenter is Damien Bouchard from the French Agency for Veterinary Medicines. And Damien is currently serving as the chair of two working parties, the Antimicrobials Working Party and now the temporary CVMP Working Party that we have. And I have to read this, on the dosage review and adjustment of established veterinary antibiotics, which is what we call ADRA for short. And that's the subject of his presentation. So over to you, Damien.
Thank you very much, Emily, for the kind word and the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. So I already heard during the beginning of this Info Day session the expectation from the CVMP and from the EMA, so I was not stressed, but now I'm a little bit. So anyway, I'm here indeed to provide some update of activities related to the important project related to dose review and adjustment of established antibiotics, so veterinary antibiotics. And here I'm glad, at least, and I'm thankful to the organizer for inviting me and to be able to present this activity in the name of the members and colleague member of the Working Party. So just some background information before going into current activities. So the story began quite a long time ago now, because the the first reflection paper that produced the CVMP is now published since 2020, with the objective to identify the feasibility of the use of non-experimental approaches to review and adjust the dosage regimen of established veterinary antibiotics. So at this time, I guess two concrete case studies was selected. So we had amoxicillin and oxytetracycline at this time, and the exercise shows the feasibility to use, of course, non-experimental approaches, even if some limitations have already been identified. So following the adoption and specific recommendation included in this first CVMP reflection paper on dose review and adjustment, in 2024, the CVMP mandated a new working group in order to establish a roadmap on a list of products and substances that would need to enter in priority the review process. So in order to achieve this objective, the mandated working group established methodologies, and a questionnaire was sent to different stakeholders, allowing to receive some information, allowing the working group to establish this priority list. So this priority list was then published in 2025, where several criteria, including the answers from the questionnaire, were used in order to establish this priority list. And I will not go into a detail of the methodologies, but at the end, two main animal species were selected as priority, so porcine and bovine species, and 5 substances have been identified for respectively, and 3 of them were common to the 2 species, namely amoxicillin, amoxicillin, oxytetracycline, and tyrosine. So following the adoption of this priority list, then the CVMP decided to create a new temporary working party, so the ADRA temporary working party, and it was created end of 2025, so the work is quite just beginning for the ADRA temporary working party. So I will be now discussing more about these temporary working party activities. So the mandate actually received from the committee was with the main objective to support the related preparation of the scientific advice procedure under Article 141(1)(I), with two main reviews. The first one to review the dosage regimen of veterinary antibiotics, including dose but also frequency and treatment duration, in order to ensure the continued efficacy and safety of antimicrobial while minimizing antimicrobial resistance, and also to assess the implication that a change in the dosage regimen might have on target animal safety, withdrawal period, and environmental risk assessment, of course. In terms of composition of the working party, here, of course, the temporary working party is multidisciplinary working party involving limited number of experts. Usually we have 2 or 3 members per relevant area of expertise identified. So we will have a pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic expert, we will have efficacy expert, target animal safety expert, withdrawal period, including withdrawal period modeling expert, and environmental risk assessment. But the working party will not do the job alone, and in fact he will definitely report all the activity to the CVMP and to the appointed rapporteur and co-rapporteurs that will be at the end responsible to establish the benefit risk of the scientific advice that will be provided by the working party. So for now, in 2026, following all this step of prioritization, mandate and composition and creation of this working party, it was decided to go for the first scientific advice. We'll put, in fact, the milestone on how the clear methodologies will be established for future, in fact, scientific advices. So the first one that will be considered by the working party was related to VMPs containing amoxicillin as single active substance in pigs for oral use and for respiratory indication only. So then, since the beginning of the year, the objective was to apply the so-called hourglass approach in order to collect all the data that would need and serve, in fact, the revision of the dosage regimen from different sources. And actually, here I wanted to take the opportunity to thank all the contributors and providers of data that support, in fact, the activity of the working party by sharing and the willingness to share the data. So here, from this call for data, which closed quite sooner, which already closed in 29th of February, so it's quite recent. We already get a quick analysis of the data that has been submitted, and here are mentioned on this slide the different stakeholders that provided actually information. So of course, information coming from marketing authorization dossiers. Thank you very much for sharing the data, and also some complementary information coming from the competent authority and from VetCast, and also from direct contact to authors that published some relevant information in the scientific literature. So going more in detail into the data we collected here without neglecting all the area of expertise that will be covered within the working party, here our priority would be indeed to establish the dosage regimen. So that's why, in fact, the priority will be first to extract from the data collected the PK and PD data in order to validate the PK-PD model, which allow us then to compute the revised or refined dosage regimen. So in terms of data received here, I just put some information in relation to the data collected. So some data were submitted in relation to pharmacokinetic that would support the dosage regimen revision, and here in total, from the marketing authorization holder and from the contact with academic colleague, we compiled 35 studies that contain individual plasmatic raw data that correspond actually to 430 animals. In relation to PK data that will support the withdrawal period revision, here all the data are mainly coming from marketing authorization holder with 18 studies compiled that represent 157 animals, which include individual tissue raw data. So when we talk about PK/PD, obviously there is not only the PK but the PD aspect, and here in terms of pharmacodynamic, most of the information will be coming or from the literature or from the UCAS database, which in fact are data related to MIC distribution for relevant target pathogens. And also I need to acknowledge that we received also some useful information from VetCast related to time kill curves that could also support in fact the establishment of models, even if they are sparse and not covering actually all the target pathogens that need to be entered the process. So here are perhaps the most easiest part, in fact, which is related to the extraction of the data we receive. But then we will need also to consider a lot of questions to build and validate the PK/PD model. Obviously, we will have discussion related to the pharmacodynamic component, namely, in fact, the MICs and ECOF, in fact, in terms of microbiological criteria that will be used and be included in our PK/PD model. So here, definitely, this PD component need to consider also the indication and the relevancy of the target pathogens for each of the products that will be considered in this process. Then, without going into details, we will need to agree on the index, so PK/PD index and target value in function of the different therapeutic objective we will be putting as an objective. And then, not the easiest part, additional consideration were requested to consider, meaning the dosing frequency. This one would be the easiest one, but also duration of treatment, which is quite complicated to tackle using PK/PD, but also risk of resistance, where here time kill curve data and mutant prevention concentration might be helpful, but also quite limiting when developing such methodologies. So you understand that our top priority would be indeed to compute the dose. So that's why, in fact, now the objective is to focus on this data extraction to allow the expert in charge of the modeling aspect of PK/PD to provide a refined dose and adjusted dose in order to let then the other expert work based on this new computed dose, meaning that once we have this refined dose, in fact, we will need to assess the impact on the withdrawal period. And here we will be investigating also two main approaches in order to also define and adjust the withdrawal period, meaning or the approach using the terminal half-life as initially presented in the first CVMP reflection paper, but also it was proposed by some experts to investigate it, so more sophisticated approach like the PBPK1. In parallel of PK modeling, we will need also to review, of course, the target animal safety and environmental risk assessment. And here again, I need to thank the marketing authorization holder for providing data to support the reassessment, because once the dose will be refined by PK/PD, the objective will be for environmental risk assessment to recalculate the PECs and the predictive concentration and the risk quotient for the different environmental compartment to see if there is a need, in fact, to put in place some mitigation measures. And in terms of target animal safety, here the objective will be a comparison of the new computed dose based on the data and margin of safety initially provided in the marketing authorization dossier. So here it is my last slide, just to conclude that currently the objective we will be putting is to adopt the first scientific advice by Q1 2027, which obviously will relate to VMPs containing amoxicillin in pig for respiratory infection. And then once we have agreed on the methodology, the model for this VMP, we expect that it will ease the process to further speed up a little bit the process for other product and other indication. So the objective, as I already mentioned, would be to refine the dosage in the product information of VMPs that are considered in order to ensure the prudent use of antibiotic in veterinary medicine. And the review process should aim to preserve the efficacy and availability while avoiding unnecessary loss of VMP or indication. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Damien, for the update. And I'm sorry if we traumatized you with the pressure, but I think it was just to say that I think it became clear a while ago that we need a range of tools to deal with updating product information for the older antimicrobials. SPC harmonization alone isn't going to be the rate of work that we need. So we need a range. Okay, so that concludes then the presentations for this session, and we will move to the questions and answers. So we have good time for that until, I think, 17:40. So yeah, we have good time. So I see Elsa, I saw you got your hand up before anyone else.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you for the 3 presentations. They were all very interesting. My name is Elsa Vecino. I'm Technical Director of Access VetMed, and my question is for Christina, as anticipated. And yeah, you touch on many interesting points, and probably other questions will come. I don't want to take a lot of time, but just on the issue of the transparency of the protection of the technical documentation periods. First of all, thank you very much for addressing this point, because it's been in our agenda for quite some time. We had identified already a long time ago as generic players that we needed indeed predictability and transparency for centralized products, but also DCPs and MRPs and national ones. So we welcome very much your provisions for addressing this concern. And the question is, first of all, about the type of information that the e-parts will contain. If you can provide some more granularity. You are probably aware that CMDV is also working on this. It's been in the agenda of CMDV for quite some time. We have discussed the this and that, and we have even seen examples on the field. So it was pretty clear that the number of years, as you say, will not be reflected. It's maybe not fair. But in the end, the level of information should ensure that everybody reaches to the same conclusion, I hope. So that could be, and it's probably through the linking to the legal articles or whatsoever. But I think it should be clear enough. And as I said, we have seen examples for MRPs and DCPs or even national products that were really hard to understand. So just a plea for making it, I don't know what you really have in mind, and maybe in coordination with CMDB. And a very concrete question, when do you plan to implement this new EPAR? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elsa. And I think that whole discussion started with a question from you in a previous meeting. I think it was an interested parties meeting. But yes, indeed, it's a long-standing discussion. CMDB are also working on it. We are, of course, discussing with them. And we are heading more or less in the same direction. The example that you saw is the idea that we have, which says, OK, this variation falls under Article 40, Paragraph 5. For example, it would be the same for adding target species. So really, you'd still have to open every EPAR and find it there, but it would say which legal provision is. I think on the centralized side, it's also easier to find the date, because everything's published in the UPD or in the Union Register of the Commission. I think that's a bigger problem more on MRPs and DCPs. Trying to agree on a date is trickier there, but we're lucky at least in that respect. The example that you saw is already there and has been there since that variation was approved. That was a couple of years ago, I think. We have also included such sentences recently in other procedures which probably don't have EPARs yet for addition of target species, where the provisions of Article 40, Paragraph 1 or 2 apply. And it's the same structure. That for this procedure, Article 40, Paragraph 1, let's say, applies, or 2, which I don't remember which one it was. So you'd have to do the math. Okay, the initial has 10 years, so adding a new target species, whether it's a minor one or a major one, gives you additional 1 year or 4 years or whatever. So you would have to be doing the math, but that would be the intention. We hope it's clear enough. We're happy to receive comments. If you don't find it clear, of course, we can amend the sentences to provide further clarity. But
well, as soon as we see the first examples, maybe we can provide feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. I see, yeah, there's a number of hands. I'll pass the floor to Gabriel Bichner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is to Dr. Bouchard, please. And I'm just wondering, looking at the program, which is ambitious, if we take PD analysis, so what I'm expecting is that in the Nordic areas in, say, Sweden, you're going to have a lower MIC than in Cyprus, for example, where it seems to be quite a high use of antibiotics. So, can then there be one dosage or will there be several? And a related question is, in terms of your ambition is for one indication for respiratory, does it mean then that if there's an indication ultimately for, say, mastitis with a different dosage, that it will be maintained into the future? Or, are we looking for basically a silver bullet with one dosage that will do everything? Or are we expecting a kind of a nuanced approach depending on the spectrum of disease across the community? Thank you.
Thank you. Damien, would you take it?
Yes, thank you very much for this relevant question indeed. So on the first one, in relation to differences of MIC that could be encountered around several European countries, actually the approach would be to only treat a wild-type population, so meaning that at least the highest MIC value that we will be including will be the ECOF. So that's why normally, in terms of wild-type population, it is acknowledging that we share, in fact, the wild-type population. So then, in the PK/PD model, there is different manners to include PD information, or to take only one single value that will be the highest MIC, which is the ECOF, or to consider the whole distribution, and here it would be refined better, actually, the dose, and perhaps lower also the expected dose that would be computed. On your second question related to is it one single dose that should cover all the indication, this is actually a question that is under discussion within the working party. What we currently propose is perhaps to have different scenario, because indeed if we have a look to the efficacy guideline, usually we request to test the least susceptible pathogens, meaning that in the current guideline and procedure, usually we test the least susceptible, and this dose will cover, in fact, the others. But actually, for the purpose of limiting the antimicrobial use, the PK/PD model can indeed propose a range of posology depending within an indication of on the MIC of the target pathogens. So indeed, for prudent use, I guess ranges of doses within an indication might be more relevant, actually, but this would need to be discussed and agreed by everyone before.
Thank you very much. See, Ellie Benere from Zoetis.
Yes, thank you, indeed. Eli Benere, Zoetis. I have a practical question for Christina again. Sorry. I would like to reflect back upon your intention to limit the extensions in clock stops, which are fully understood, of course. But could you confirm that there would be some flexibility included for the situations, and let's hope they are rarely, where we would have a limited market application and where we would not fit the conditions of the limited market classification during the procedure anymore, and would, as an applicant, try to upgrade it to a full Article 8? Or, because it's a different legal basis, per definition, would that mean you need to withdraw and need to go for a new application?
I'm not sure we've considered that in quite as much detail. But as I said, we plan to produce guidance on it. You will be consulted on the guidance, and maybe they will go in a bit more detail and then have a think what that would mean. I agree with you. I hope that never happens. But if it does, it will probably have to be handled on a case-by-case basis, and we'll have to. It will depend on how big the data gaps are, what the timelines are that are expected to bring the dossier up to Article 8. I'm not sure we will be able to, but we may try and address it in the guidance. Let's see. But as I said, we haven't considered it so far yet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll take one of the questions that's come in via Slido, which is quite specific, but I think we have an answer, which is always a bonus. So it's the one at the top of the screen. In the interest of earlier market access, can exceptional circumstances marketing authorization, so that's Article 25, be combined with in parallel certification of the first vaccine platform technology master file to advance for the second exceptional marketing authorization candidate? So we're talking here probably a vaccine range. So I think, Christina, you're taking that one.
Yes, thank you. It is not possible to get a VPTMF certification in an exceptional circumstances application. It's in the section in Annex 2 on VPTMF. It says the first product that is authorized based, or better said, the platform can only be certified based on a full dossier in the first range of the first product of the range. So we need for a platform certification, we need the full data, we need a thorough assessment. It can't be done in the framework of exceptional circumstances. What can be done, and Johan mentioned we have already had a case, is when you already have a certified platform to use that in an exceptional circumstances dossier, and that did result in a quicker approval. But based on the text in the legislation, the VPTMF certification has to be carried out in the framework of a full assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take I think, quite a quick one back to ADRA, which is, again, the one on the top of the screen. So for Damien to maybe just offer any reflections possible at this time. Are the working group exploring the use of AI tools to help compile and analyze the data?
Well, that's an actual question indeed related to use of AI, but actually, no, we didn't investigate the AI tool to help in compiling and extracting the data. Actually, all the extraction, just to precise, are doing manually in the old school manner, but all the data submitted, in fact, I more or less scan of PDF document or of paper document, so we need to line by line, animal by animal to copy paste indeed the data. But perhaps we were not aware of this tool. Perhaps they could be helpful indeed.
So, any suggestions welcome, by the sound of it. Yeah, I see. I've got several from the room. Yes, this gentleman on the left.
Yes, if the Eco-Animal Health, the question to Johan or potentially to Ivo, looking at the CVMP working plan, I was wondering, is there any ongoing initiative looking at recreating a collaboration model with VMD in order to facilitate harmonized assessment between Europe and the UK? Thank you.
The short answer to that is no, at this moment. So, because it's dependent on, I would say the Commission has set strict rules. What we're currently working on is access to the pharmacovigilance database, UPD, that is necessary for dealing with the UK&I products, and also for the upload of the sales data of antimicrobials for the UK&I products. So that is the focus of our collaboration at this moment with the VMD. And at this moment, nothing else. Over.
Thank you, Eva.
Klaus wants to come back on that, I'm sure.
No, I have another question.
Well, if I could
Don't
just
worry,
ask
but it
you-
is also more to you. And it wasn't covered in the presentations, but it's an ongoing question for the last couple of years. Any news on the MRA with EU and US on GMP inspections that is still on the web as being kind of delayed because of non-qualifying countries of Croatia and Malta? And there's no progress for more than a year or two. And I just wonder, is the problem in the EU? Is it on the US side, or where is it? Where is it stuck?
Okay, I'll pass to Jordi.
Yeah, thank you, Klaus. We've been actively also trying to get those this MRA, approved. It's a question of legislation on the affected countries. I know that from the Commission also they've been trying to, and together with the FDA, we're trying to take it forward. I know that there is some small progress ongoing, but I cannot give you good news right now. So it's still ongoing, and I can tell you that we are really trying also. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a question from the right-hand side. Yeah.
Claudia Sigge, BFT. I have a question with regard to the ADRA project. So you explained you are going for the ECOFs. I think that's the epidemiological cut-off values and the wild-type population. So why did you decide not to go for the clinical breakpoint, even if a veterinary-specific clinical breakpoint exists?
I think that's for Damien.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. And indeed, actually, there is a very limited number of European clinical breakpoints. So that's why actually we also decided to go for the ECOF, because this is where we have the most European information. And the limitation also in considering clinical breakpoint is also because, in fact, more high you will go for the MIC values that you will be putting in the model, more high the dose computed will be. And then more you will have an impact on withdrawal period, target animal safety. So that's why the objective would be, indeed, to optimize the treatment only for the wild-type population would be the susceptible bacteria that are expected to be treatable with the dosed regimen that will be computed.
But the other ones, if you have a clinical break, that could be treated as well. So that will result in more infections that cannot be treated with this type of antibiotics, even if in practice it would work.
Yes, in clinical it will indeed work, but the difference between ECOF and clinical breakpoint, sometimes it's at least for ECOF we know that it is wild-type population without, in fact, acquired mechanism of resistance, and these are, I guess, the target population that we need to tackle with the product.
Thank you. Okay, I think I'm going to jump back to limited markets now, because the question at the top of the screen is something that is, Christina, in her presentation touched on, that we need to pay attention to what's going on during the procedure, because the landscape can change. So what will be the consequences of limited market classification not being applicable anymore at, for example, day 180 of the procedure? Will it be possible to switch the legal basis to Article 8? Christina.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I note I need to make a clarification. That's what happens when you try not to include too many legal references on a slide. What we're reviewing is the Article 23 eligibility. The limited markets, obviously, if the product is for rabbits, it remains for rabbits. That is still a limited market, so that would remain. So what we're checking is the eligibility for Article 23. And indeed, if it turns out, for example, at day 180, that it's no longer eligible for Article 23, the product would either need a new legal basis or it would need to be withdrawn. It is just, the way it is. I think the Commission has given a presentation on that in the past, on the legal certainty. It can be switched, it can be switched if the data can be provided and the data gaps can be filled. We will accept that, and that ties into Ellie's question on the clock stops and whether we can accept a longer clock stop. As I said, let's hope to never cross that bridge. But it will be possible to change the legal basis if the data can be provided. Thank you.
Thank you. Rothia, did you want to comment, or it's been covered? Okay. Okay, then I take what has, well, we can't avoid QRD, so let's take a QRD question. Yes. Regarding the QRD timelines and implementation, so the VRA GI18, how should marketing authorization holders address those cases where the VRA GI18 was submitted ahead of the due date, but no letter of approval nor final text are received once the due date is reached? I have a suspicion this is more relevant to the national side than it is for centrally authorized products, so I think we won't reply on behalf of MRP DCP. I mean, from our side, I think
it won't happen.
It's not. We will, and I know everyone will endeavour to make sure that the VRAs are assessed by the deadline. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of late nights in the time leading up to that. I don't know if any of my colleagues or yeah, we'll. I think everyone will do their best. Was there a question from the room? Oh, sorry, I can't see. Nancy.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I have the question also to Damien Bouchard on the ADRO. Well, thank you very much for starting this exercise. We received many examples where veterinarians feel that the SPC from older antibiotics are not anymore up to date. So this is a really complex but really very welcome initiative. My first question was on the amoxicillin for oral doses for respiratory disease. Now you have different bacteria that cause this, and I just wondered, like Pastorella, Streptococcus, Bordetella, and many more, how do you do that? Do you pool the MIC data, or how is this done? And then my second question was, it's really very positive that so much data has been received for this combination. But do you foresee that maybe in the future for other combination, maybe there will not be enough data to do the PKPD modeling? And in this case, is there a sort of plan B? And then maybe the third question, maybe the most tricky one, is the first combination, the first scientific result will be normally in 2027, but there's now 20 prioritized substances. How long do you think that could take? Thank you.
Okay, I think Damien and then Ivo would like to comment as well. No, Damien, you go first.
Okay, perhaps on the technical one, I will go first. But on the MIC, I guess it's quite similar to the first question, where indeed we would be able or to take the least susceptible pathogen and put a single dose that cover all the indication, so all the target pathogen that would be implied in respiratory infection, or it can be feasible also based on the MIC distribution for each of the bacterial species to compute, in fact, a dose, and then it could be a scenario where a range of doses might be proposed in function of the target pathogen that would be considered. So this is for the MIC. At least the scenario are feasible.
No, thank you very much for that question, Nancy, because I think it's good to do some expectation management here. ADRA and the approach that ADRA is using certainly has its limitations, and the limitations are indeed the availability of data, the availability of experts in the network, how we can progress it, and the large number of combinations that needs to be assessed. And we're currently in the pilot, trying to find out, okay, what's the best way to approach this? And as Damien has pointed out very elegantly in his presentation, this is to gain experience and to see then how we can make it workable and more accessible. Now, we do understand there's quite a lot of pressure on this project, and the other approach may not be the perfect approach to really give fast results on adjusting doses of specifically old antimicrobials. So we are currently in communication also with the Commission, and there was a presentation last week at the Standing Committee. But I've started a communication with the Commission to see what other options do we have. Because if we rely on ADRA and the speed that this develops, and you could say it takes 100 years before we've done all this work, and that can never be the intention. So we may have to think about other options that we can bring in, but they would still need to have data or experience, and we can go for expert opinions, but still you would need to find the experts that are willing to, share whatever they think, and how that then can be translated into a regulatory action, which is the adjustment of the dose in the SPC. And I think that's where the big challenge lies at this moment. We know we have a problem. We know it's a big problem. It creates problems in veterinary practice, certainly in combination with Article 106.1. And this is something that requires a solution. I think we can only achieve a good outcome if we decide that we all work together on this. So whatever the industry can do, whatever the regulators can do, and where we can really come to conclusions that may change the situation. So we have to think creatively. ADRA could be one of the solutions. It could be a solution for many antimicrobials, but there will always be a group where we don't have the data, we don't have the expertise, etc. So yeah, a plea to think creatively, to come up with solutions, and to see how we can progress this. Over. And Johan.
Yeah, well, so in relation to the speed of the other project, of course, we are now doing the first one, which gives us the experience. But once we had that, we can actually work more efficiently. So now we're looking at one species, one indication, so respiratory infections. But I think when we do the next one, we can actually do more target species and more all the indications together. Because once you have modeled the PK, it's quite easy also to, and once you have this model, PK/PD model, you can also look at all the other indications in the SPC. So I think that can be an element of speeding up the process. If there's no data at all in support of the change of the dose, then you can actually question that there is a problem. So, and then the conclusion can be that the products that are on the market are fine. So that is also a consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan. And just to tackle before we move away from ADRA, the third question on the screen, which has been partly touched on, but could additional indications be included in the scientific advice? Damien?
Yeah. Well, yes, in the future, the response will be yes, yeah.
Okay, baby steps. Yes. Yes, Andreas Werner, please.
Yes, Andreas Werner from Villa Farm. Just the respiratory pathogens for sensitivity, the mix for amoxicillin are pretty close together. So that's not the biggest problem, I think. There are always bacteria which are resistant to amoxicillin, but they have a natural resistance. And the other, by preparing the documentation, I found that most of the respiratory pathogens are pretty close together with their mix. But you will always have some antimicrobials which are really which are really resistant by natural resistance already.
Would you comment on that, Damien?
No, it is true indeed that the MIC for amoxicillin and for the main bacterial pathogen will be quite close, but actually it was published in the first reflection papers that for some pathogens perhaps the MIC might be too high to be kept in the indication. So that's what should be assessed in the future. And it was, for example, the case for Bordetella, in fact, for which the MIC are too high. And in fact, the conclusion is, or we take Bordetella to compute a very high dose that will cover all the pathogens, but then we'll have a lot of impact on withdrawal period, etc. Or the question is just to change antimicrobial and not include Bordetella in the indication for Amox. Yeah.
Good, thank you. I'm going to take the question on the clock stops because it's a topic that's on our radar at the moment, as Christina touched on, but I might ask Johan to comment on it as well. So can flexibilities still possible in clock stop amendments, or can flexibility still be possible in clock stop amendments, provided it is asked for before the clock stop time, by which I would interpret, well, a lengthening of the clock stop is generally what's requested. Not always, it can be shortening, but lengthening. So Christina, and then maybe, I mean, this ties in, it ties into why we're asking for a change to the clock stop. And yeah, Christina and then Johan, I think.
Yes, thank you. It's not, I gave the examples of the one that were submitted at more or less at the deadline for submission, just to show you what we're facing at the moment. Obviously, most of them are submitted in advance, so it's not so much a matter of when they're submitted. And the main thing is that they should be justified. And as I said, we would still be accepting the clock stop extensions, and then we can be flexible, but the main point is if the clock stop extension is the third in a row and it's becoming too long and it's obvious that the dossier has been premature, that's where we would like to be stricter, because it's not serving any purpose, not for you, not for us, to be having those extended procedures. And it's taking up the capacity of the network. The assessors simply forget when they get the next submission 2 years later. They don't remember what they've assessed 2 years before, so they have to start from scratch. So I guess that's what Johan wants to compliment on. So yeah, sorry.
So you said exactly what I wanted to say. So yep.
Okay, then I'll take the last question that came in from Slido. I think it's one we've touched on before, and it's asking for any development, but I'll read it out. So the eligibility for the regulatory path for innovation remains unclear for Article 25 non-immunologicals and novel therapies within the possible criterion for a novel therapy of a nascent field in veterinary medicine. So the guidance is limited only to what is not eligible versus establishing criteria for eligibility. Is there any development on this? So I'm looking around me wildly. I think I think we've had this. What we've said in relation to this question in the past is that it will be case by case, and I think trying to create a guidance document of what is included in nascent field. I mean, if we could do that, it maybe wouldn't be a nascent field already. So it's. I think we proceed case by case. We have various means of requesting classification and Jacqueline's going to save me in a minute. We have various means of classifying products where companies can come to us and put their case forwards. But that's my get-out clause. I'll hand over to Jacqueline Poot, who's a CVMP member and chair of the Novel Therapies Working Party.
Yes, and who is not going to save you, sorry. But it's just to say that we discussed this issue at every meeting of the Novel Therapies Working Party, and we have not come up with a solution so far. Indeed, as you say, it's very difficult to come up with something that doesn't exist yet. But there's a lot of brain power in this room. So if anyone has an idea of how to come up with what is a nascent field, then please let me know. Thank you.
I have the solution. It's sandboxes. That is the solution. Rothia would like to say something.
We had taken this question also in the stakeholders meeting with the Commission, and we had written down in the list of questions that possibly could be clarified with the update of the guidelines to applicants. But when reflecting about how do we actually define nascent technologies, we realize that if we try to come up with any definition, what we are going to do is to restrict, because whatever it doesn't fit in there, it will not be in. So we think it is not in anyone's interest to come up with a definition or with criteria yet, and that we should leave it case by case, really.
Okay. Noemi Garcia.
Yes, and just to complement with that, good afternoon. So how is handled at the moment? I think Christina already refer to the classification procedure we have. So we have a classification procedure that is volunteer and is free of charge. And companies can request classification on, the biological, non-biological. But there is also a question about, is my product a novel therapy? So in any doubt, I would encourage you to yes, ask. So we receive that question. We take it for consideration. We involve the CMP, we involve the NTWP if necessary, and case by case, we decide. Well, we decide. There is a decision involving, as I said, these groups on the nascent field and therefore the novel therapy characteristics of your product, because it's very important that is clarified very early for the requirements.
Thank you, Naomi. And I see we had a question from Zoetis.
Yes, it's a follow-up since Rocio indeed mentioned that this has been discussed in Brussels, and for everyone, visibility. It is agreed the principle that not defining probably gives more flexibility than defining. But in this specific case, it's critical that we really stick to the wording of the regulation, which states nascent field rather than nascent technology. And this is a follow-up of the conversation we had, because if we restrict it to nascent technology, then we are thinking about special manufacturing method. A nascent field, in its own wording, can mean also a well-established technology, however, bringing something new in terms of mechanism of action, therapeutic approach, benefit for the animal. The wording is very broad, and I hope that at least is not further restricted. Otherwise, it can really undermine potential for innovation. Ivo?
No, I think that's why CVMP in all its wisdom has established the NTTWP, the Novel Technologies and Therapies Working Party, which is basically reflecting nascent field. So there you have your definition if you want any.
Thank you, and I'm always in favour of sticking to the wording in the legal articles, so we'll go with nascent field. I'm going to close now, so that we can take a rest and in advance of tomorrow's session. So I think what we've seen from today is there's still a lot of, let's call it construction work going on with new areas coming up for innovation, new legal frameworks. There's big challenges. We've touched on how to maintain availability of older products. And then I would say the usual, I'm going to call them gremlins, that we have for post-authorization or maintenance activities, which, to be honest, tend to persist regardless of the legal framework. But we need to keep sight of the high-level goals, which is animal health, One Health, and better regulations. So let's make sure we keep sight of the forest, not just the trees. And then, and I will also say that on the vet side, I think we see what's coming on the human side, which is the new pharma legislation, and I think we can feel a little bit smug or look at our human counterparts with maybe some schadenfreude of what they've got ahead of them, and because we've done a lot of work with the network in industry and all the stakeholders. So we should congratulate ourselves for what has been done. And we are a relatively small community on the vet side, and I think that the collaborative solidarity is what has kept this sector punching above its weight over the years, and we should keep that going. I would like to thank all the presenters for the really comprehensive and informative presentations. We all know it takes work to do these presentations on top of the day job, but it's really benefited all of us that they took the time. And additionally, I would like to thank the colleagues, some of whom are sitting behind me, those who organised the Info Day over the years. It's a well-oiled machine by now, but there's a lot of work that goes in to bring it for all of us. And it's an important date always in the regulatory calendar. And then thank you very much to all the participants for sitting in this very busy room and still staying with us and asking questions. It made it a lot more interesting. So we'll carry on tomorrow on day 2, where we have, and Jordi will be chairing the second day tomorrow, and we'll be focusing on innovation in session 1 and 2. afraid it starts at 9 o'clock tomorrow. But in the meantime, have a great evening. Thank you very much.